Hello, and you're listening to your Majesty's Secret Podcast. I like my podcast shaken, not stirred. Only on the Four-Eyed Radio Network. If you'd like to check out more shows, go to foureyedradio.com.
Hey listeners, Eric here, also known as Trekkie B47, from the Starfleet Escape Podcast and the Ranger Command Power Hour. The more phenomenal episode you're about to listen to is brought to you by Raven Designs, illustration and design that fit your personality. For samples and inquiries, visit ravencruise.com.
Bond. James Bond. Shaken, not stirred.
Utter one more syllable and I'll have you killed.
I thought Christmas only comes once a year.
For your eyes only, darling.
I never joke about my web 007.
For England, James?
Come in, Univex. James Bond here.
Am I going to have a problem with you, Bond?
Allow me to introduce myself.
You're that secret agent! That English secret agent from England!
No, you're cleverer than you look.
Still better than looking cleverer than you are.
My God, what's Bond doing?
I think he's attempting re-entry, sir.
007 reporting for duty.
Hello, the name's Berkeley, Ziggy Berkeley from Cinema on the Rocks, and with me is Eric Dewey from Socially Awkward Studios, and you are listening to Her Majesty's Secret Podcast, only on the Four-Eyed Radio Network. That's right, this is the show where we discuss Bond, James Bond. We're into bondage and we don't care who knows it. And today we're going to take a little bit of a detour, and we're going to discuss things that are fun for the whole family!
Yay! Come on, kids, let's play a game.
Yes, let's play a game. Let's watch cartoons. Let's read a choose-your-own-adventure book. We're going to do all three, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, because it wasn't enough that we had the original literature of Ian Fleming and then Kingsley Amis and John Gardner and so on. It wasn't enough that we've had one of the most successful film franchises in history, now going on for 50 years. No, there's money to be made on other channels. And let's face it, if you can't adapt a sex maniac, functionally alcoholic assassin who trots the globe into something for little children, what can you adapt?
Exactly. Yeah, it just lends itself perfectly to the genre, I think.
Yeah, completely. And the best part about it is everything we're going to discuss here was fully sanctioned by Ian and Danjak.
I think we've already established that as long as there was a paycheck in it, Ian Fleming would sign off on just about anything. But yes, it is kind of scary to think that that all of these things were official, licensed, and just, I guess, are they canon? That's scary.
I don't think we can possibly consider... Well, one of them we might be able to consider canon. I don't think the rest we can. And to be completely fair, all of this was done well after Ian Fleming was dead. So what we're looking at here, we're going to start with something that we first mentioned a while ago and threatened to discuss as a joke. And then we figured, why not? What the hell? Well, the joke was on us. So we're going to discuss the first 7 episodes of James Bond Jr., a cartoon series that aired starting in 1991 when Ian and Danjak were in the middle of a whole bunch of lawsuits and so on, but also figured, we'd like to kind of make some money. We're in between movies. We haven't made one in a couple of years, so what can we do here? Oh, I know. We're going to take our oversexed assassin and turn him into a kids program.
Seems legit. Yeah, seems like a good plan.
Yeah, I mean, they made a cartoon out of Rambo in the mid-'80s, so why not? That was actually something that kind of surprised me as I was watching these episodes of James Bond Jr. is they were made in the early 90s. It's like they feel like they were made in the mid-'80s.
They really do. They have that early to mid-'80s cartoon feel to them, even though, I mean, you do get a sense of the 90s from them, from some of the characters and such, but the quality and the storytelling and just about everything else screams 80s cartoons.
Yeah, the visuals are very much, if you remember the original G.I. Joe cartoons, and the original Transformers cartoons, more so the G.I. Joe. That's basically what these look like. And of course, because you cannot possibly shoot bullets around children, everything's a laser.
Of course. Pew, pew, pew.
But the fashions, too, are very 80s. I mean, we're talking LA Gear here. And then, of course, there is the song.
Are we ready? Are we going to subject people to this? I think we should. We had to listen to it.
We have to, because, we love you, our audience. We really appreciate you. We're glad you're there. We're glad you listen to us every other week. And we really think the world of you. However, we also think that you should share some of our pain. Yes. And so here you go. We're going to have you listen to the theme song from the James Bond Jr. cartoon. Please.
This is a hot track coming at you.
Yes.
Bond. James Bond Jr. No one can stop him, but scum always tries. Young Bond cuts through each web of spies. He learned the game from his Uncle James. Now he's heir to the name James Bond. James Bond Jr. Look out, he's coming through. He's got a job to do while he rescues the girl. James Bond Jr. chases scum around the world.
Yay.
That guitar track sells it, really. I mean, without that, without the... it would be nothing. But with that, oh my goodness, that's a hot track right there.
And in case you were wondering, they don't believe in such a thing as incidental music in this cartoon. Every single bit of incidental music keys off of that song.
It really does, and it's so bad because it reminds you instantly. You get that song stuck in your head again, and you're like, "Oh no, no, not again!"
It gets to the point where you're about to turn the corner on the street, and as you're making the decision, you hear dun 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 dun.
That's the part that always gets in my head. That guitar riff, man. Woo! Oh. But one thing about the song is that it pretty much lays out for you exactly what you're going to be watching, which is a horrible version of a James Bond storyline. You already start with, okay, it's his nephew. It's James Bond's nephew, right? But so how is he junior? Already you've lost me.
Well, there are some possibilities here. I mean, even now, of course, we have to jump some sharks. And so far, there haven't been any sharks, by the way. Oh, no, wait, never mind. I take that back. We'll get there.
Yeah.
Okay. No, but you have to just forget the fact that James Bond is not only an orphan, but an only child.
Yes.
Therefore, has no actual brothers or sisters, and therefore would have a very hard time being an uncle.
Now, it could be by marriage, in theory. But
in theory, it's possible that
even more away.
Tracy happened to have a sibling who we never heard of, and I'm pretty sure she was an only child as well. But maybe, or it could be that James Bond is from... And now, assuming this, it could also be that James Bond Jr. is because James Bond did the Alabama thing. And so he can be an uncle and a father at the same time. It's possible.
Yeah, but it's really tough to wrap your head around because first of all, you do have the issue of James Bond supposedly being an only child and an orphan, so he won't have a brother or sister to be an uncle for a nephew. And then even if it is by marriage, even if it's a future marriage that we haven't seen yet or whatever, it's still, that even takes more away from this kid getting the junior title. Why would your nephew by marriage only get your name as junior? It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, I do know of some people who have these really highfalutin families that really want to keep a name in, but then they will go with the second. Mm-hmm. And, that's creepy but acceptable. Personally, I'm not into the generational name thing, but I understand that a lot of families are. If that floats your boat, probably a yacht. Okay.
I wouldn't mind having a junior, but I wouldn't, if I did have a junior myself, I wouldn't, expect him to have a third. That would be entirely on his choice, but I wouldn't mind having a junior.
I'm sure your daughter appreciates not being named Eric.
Probably. Most likely. I'll ask her sometime in the future. I'm like, hey, sure you don't want to change? It's just some paperwork and like $50. We could go down to the courthouse, take care of this right now. I don't think that would go over well with anyone in this house. So,
and then there is the matter. We could have made this so much easier. Because let's face it, have you ever seen James Bond whip out a glove before going at it? No, there are probably lots of James Bond Juniors out there that he just never knew about. And we already know of one official James Bond Junior he didn't know about. We don't know what the kid was named, but I don't think that's this one.
I'm pretty sure that kid would look significantly more Asian than the James Bond Junior in this cartoon series, though.
Yes, who is, of course, definitely very, very white.
Extremely.
Just like everybody, except for the token black guy who is a coach.
Of course. It's really, really bad. But yeah, well, and to be fair though, on that front, if you think about it, a lot of the women he sleep with get killed shortly thereafter. So
enough survive.
There are some that make it. So yeah, he's probably got at least one or two running around. But I wonder if they would carry the name.
I would guess only in their minds if they've ever been told as something of an object of vengeance. But you never know. Could be otherwise. Maybe there's admiration there.
Well, according to the theme song, he learned the game from his Uncle James.
Yes, so he does know James Bond, and that's another thing. Let's assume James Bond is an uncle. Let's just assume that, okay, all of this is fine, and, drink some more. Can you imagine James Bond around children? At all?
Not really, no. But I can imagine that if he ever was around a child for a long period of time, he would probably end up teaching them how to, assassinate.
Drink.
Exactly. I mean, what else is he going to teach him? What else has he known his entire life? He's not going to be like, hey, let's go play some baseball. No, he's going to be like, okay, well, here's a Walther PPK. Here's how you load it. Here's how you clean it. Here's how you shoot it. These are the things I know. This is what I can share with the next generation.
Okay, so your mother's out for the night. We're going to show you two things. First, this is how you make a proper martini. Second, this is how you play Baccarat. And then this is how you catch somebody cheating at canasta.
You might go golfing with him, in long, laborious, boring, slow fashion. That
I can imagine James Bond killing it at a mini golf course.
Oh, yeah. He'd be good. What's really crazy about this show, though, is not only do we have the James Bond Jr., who we've already discussed the extremely tenuous connection to the original James Bond as they make up here, but then he happens to go to school with a couple of other people that have familiar names to us, doesn't he?
Yes, he does, including the person I suspect to be Eric's favorite. Like, dude, it's like Gordo Leiter. The son of Felix Leiter, who is a, totally tubular surfer dude type. Dude, complete with the David Lee Roth, blonde mane and everything. It's wow.
It's absurd. Yeah, he's this total surfer dude, but he looks like he spends all his time at the gym skipping leg day, though. So I'm not sure how he would stay on a surfboard. He's kind of top heavy there, but it is what it is. Evidently, that is so Gordo is Felix's son, right? That's what they're going with on this one.
Yeah, I think that's what they're going with.
Okay, so they're going direct son-father relationship with Felix Leiter. I can't remember any incarnation of Felix Leiter that would yield that totally tubular Gordo.
He got married once, and that lasted long enough for nothing. So unless they cohabitated for a long time, which is acceptable, I'm just not seeing it happening.
Yeah, it's a stretch, but at least he's not nephew. They already got one nephew, so what else are they going to use? Maybe somebody's grandson.
Yes, like IQ Boothroyd.
Yes, Q's grandson. Now I'm assuming that this was the original Q that they were going for.
Considering that they do the voice is actually, I think, a credible attempt to do Desmond Llewellyn as a teenager.
Yeah, I would go with that. So they've got IQ because he's smart, and because they want to use the letter Q in some shape or form without actually just straight up using it, evidently.
And just an aside here, he looks vaguely like they used to have at Burger King a kids club for their versions of the Happy Meal. They had someone in it named IQ who had kind of the same hairstyle, and it kind of frightens me.
I think that's the generic nerdy kid hairstyle. If you're a smart kid, you have to have that hairstyle if you were in a cartoon in that time period, I guess.
So, and of course, IQ always builds gadgets, including a brand new watch every episode.
Every single episode, you get a new watch, which we never see. The one thing I don't think that watch ever does is tell time. Not once when they show this watch was there any indication that there was any way for that watch to display the time. Did you ever see the time printed on the watch? I never did.
Not that I can think of, no.
It was always that 3-button configuration. It had the 2 small square buttons and then the larger rectangular button, and always something fantastic coming out of this thing. We had heat rays and saws and lasers and basically everything you could think of. And of course, every single episode you got the new watch, and every single episode that new edition came in very handy.
Indeed. And of course, IQ explains every invention he makes at sometime early on in the episode, and they all get used.
Yep. Every single time, which is great for a 20-minute show. They managed to pack a lot in.
Now, the one thing that kind of creeps me out name-wise, and it took a few moments. I caught it by the time the episode was halfway through, but it took a scene or two for it to hit me. We do have, of course, a female lead who is the standard love interest for James Bond Jr. She is the daughter of the school headmaster, and her name is Tracy.
Mm-hmm.
Tracy. Think about where you've heard that name before and why this is suddenly really damn creepy.
Yeah. At least they didn't make her like a long-distance relative of that Tracy. That would have been over the top. But, using the name was a little questionable, I think. But, I mean, obviously the kids watching this probably have no clue. The kids who were watching it at the time probably had no clue whatsoever. I'm sure the majority of them had never bothered to watch on Her Majesty's Secret Service. So the chances that they'd get the meaning are very small. But we did, and it broke my heart.
It did. And of course, because we still have to have James Bond, teenager, be a womanizer of some sort, even though we're assuming he's not actually getting down and dirty and busy with anyone. I don't think we've ever even seen him kiss anyone. Nonetheless, there are several occasions, even in the first 7 episodes, where there is another female who fawns over him, and conveniently, the episode then writes Tracy as far away from Bond as possible. It's just magical.
Yes, I guess it would probably be the Moneypenny position, although she's so more blatant about
that I think Moneypenny is Phoebe, the one who looks kind of like Velma, except she actually goes for guys.
Yeah, that's who I was talking about.
Yeah, I was still referring to Tracy. Tracy conveniently goes away whenever another female character.
Oh yeah, you're talking about the guest lady to be saved in each episode. Yes.
Yeah, because Phoebe, I think, is supposed to be Tracy's best friend.
Yeah, even though she's desperately wants to get down and dirty with Bond Jr.
Yes, and he always introduces himself, Bond, James Bond Jr.
The way he says it, it almost sounds like it's. To me, it sounds like he's like contractually obligated to add the junior at the end because he always sounds sad about it. He's like Bond, James Bond Jr. That's the way it always came off to me. Like it was like I'm going to say this line because I can, but I am contractually obligated to add this junior part at the end.
Now, I will throw a bone here. With the exception of the obnoxious, wow, totally tubular Gordo Lighter voice, I don't mind the voices on any of our main characters. I think they did all right with them. And I actually think, like I said, the guy that got to do IQ you can tell he's trying to shoot for some Desmond Llewellyn, and I think he nails it. In terms of, trying to do the Desmond Llewellyn type speech pattern as a teenager. I think that's okay. And James Bond Jr., he seems like a nice, amiable guy.
Yeah, he's got a really mild English accent. It's not overbearing, but it is obvious that it's there, and it's not a horribly annoying voice. Honestly, though, I would take Gordo Gordo's voice anyway over Trevor Noseworthy's voice any day.
Oh yeah, that's the character who is written in specifically to be the annoying jerk character. This is so we can satisfy a trope.
Yes.
He is Trevor Noseworthy the Fourth, so we do have one of those generational things. He's there because his family is rich. Mm-hmm. And his primary occupation is whenever Bond goes off campus for something, he tries to tattle on him.
Yep.
That's his primary occupation for being there.
Yep.
That's it. And to be obnoxious.
Exactly. Yes, he's the one character that really doesn't have any sort of parallel whatsoever in the real Bond universe, because he's completely in there because to fulfill that 80s and 90s cartoon need to have somebody trying to tattle on the good guy all the time. That's all he's there for, and he makes himself exceptionally annoying doing it, which is the point. I mean, to be fair, but oh man, can't stand Noseworthy.
Yeah, I just want to punch him in the noseworthy every time I see him. And then rounding out, we have two more recurring characters who show up all the time. Mm-hmm. That would be Tracy's father, Bradford Milbanks, who is the headmaster president of Warfield Academy, the school where James Bond Jr. goes. It is a boarding school, which used to be a counterintelligence center that got converted to being a boarding school.
How convenient.
So now it's like a boarding school for children of intelligence types and just plain rich people.
Good mix.
And then we finally have our token black guy, the gym coach, Burton Buddy Mitchell, who used to be an FBI agent who also knows Bond and Gordo's relatives.
Of course he does. At least he's not like a direct relation to anybody. At least they stopped with the direct relations with just the first three main characters.
Well, come on. Who were they going to say he was related to? We weren't casting black guys in major roles as anything but villains until after this was made. So he couldn't be related to anyone like Tanner, or he couldn't be related to that Felix Leiter.
Maybe he's Burton Buddy Quarrel. No? Okay.
Wow. I can now picture it, and it disturbs me.
Sorry about that.
No, you're not.
I know, I'm really not. But so that rounds out the essentially the good guys. With Trevor, of course, not really counting as a good guy, but not really a villain of the show either. But there is a villainous group on the show, a reoccurring group of villains.
Yes, in fact, they reoccur every single episode. Now, each episode has a different villain to pick from. We'll discuss the individual villains as we get to each episode, but the overall villainous organization is Scum.
Yes,
Scum.
And
they are led by Scumlord.
Scumlord, yes, that makes sense.
Who looks kind of like Dr. Claw from Inspector Gadget. They do the Blofeld type thing. In fact, there's a rumor he might be Blofeld, though of course we could never actually say that because we don't own the rights at the time. And, Kevin McClory might be watching.
He's
so you never actually see him. You just see this arm and a cat. And the cat's name is Scumball. Really? Really? Scumball?
Scumlord and his Scumball. Well, all right. Scum, of course, they have it here, says it stands for Saboteurs and Criminals United in Mayhem.
Which I will say is actually better than the real terror organization that did exist in the mid-1970s called Scum. And it was just a political group, and then it elevated to terror because I'm not making this up, I swear. One of their members was actually responsible for one of the 2 assassination attempts on President Gerald Ford. That was the Society for Cutting Up Men. It was a militant feminist organization.
Oh, wow. Wow, that was a real thing.
Yeah, that was a real thing.
I need to read some history. Man, that is unbelievable. Yes, Saboteurs and Criminals United in Mayhem is definitely better than the Society for Cutting Up Men. Wow. All right. Well, so should we jump into the discussion of the individual episodes, or do we want to talk about some of the villains that we see as part of Scum first? Or
let's get to them as we get to each episode.
All right.
And Hey, audience, I do suggest you start drinking if you haven't already.
I was thinking of a drinking game for watching this, and the one thing that came to mind is the one that you cannot add to the drinking game is you cannot drink every time you hear one of the villains refer to James Bond Jr. as Young Bond, because you will die of alcohol poisoning within one episode if you do that.
There is another one that you can die from alcohol poisoning from one episode, and that's every time you hear dun 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 dun.
Yep, easily. So those two, scratch those off the list. I'm sure we can add plenty others to get you plenty plastered by the time an episode is finished, but those ones are just too prevalent. You will die.
Yes. So without further ado, we have the first 007 episodes of Bond, James Bond Jr.
Oh, man. So the very first episode, appropriately titled The Beginning, has actually a fairly cool opening scene for a cartoon show. It led me to believe that maybe this wasn't going to be as bad as I thought. I was quickly, relieved of that, any thought of that whatsoever. But the opening scene was pretty cool. We have James Bond Jr. being chased around in his Aston Martin DB5 with the bulletproof shield, evidently.
Except now it's laser-proof.
Well, yeah. Well, of course, because everything's lasers. Pew, pew, pew.
Because you can't shoot bullets at children.
But lasers are okay. And you can chase them off the road in their cars. That's all right.
Because apparently he's at least 16 because he's driving.
Yeah. The opening scene starts out pretty cool. And then he takes the car off a cliff, engages flight mode, and we see the most unrealistic interpretation of a flying car that I think I've ever seen in anything ever. And
you mean you didn't believe the doors turning into wings and the propeller coming out?
It was just so bad. And at that moment, I knew that was the moment that it went from, hey, maybe there's something. Oh, no, never mind. Okay, now I see what we're in for.
I was also kind of wondering how the car chasing him was able to drive, since the hood popped open and a giant laser that obviously took up the entire space under the hood popped out. So I'm wondering, where's the engine?
You could ask that. That would be a valid question. I do not have an answer for you.
Maybe it's like an old VW Beetle and it's in the back. It's possible.
Could be a rear mount or a mid mount engine. You don't. Yeah. But no. Yeah. It gets pretty bad after the you see the bad guy crashing through stone fences and trees and everything else, and finally he's stopped by a couple of bales of hay on the back of a tow truck.
Yeah, but hey, it's cartoons. What do you expect? As IQ would tell us in just a few moments, the yoke's on us.
But yes, so we see Bond escape the villains and go to school.
Yes, and this is his first day at school, and everyone, of course, fawns all over him when he first shows up. And we meet Gordo Lighter, who is really, totally stoked when he sees the Aston Martin DB5.
Totally. And
he surfs down a set of stairs. Really. Not making that up.
On a food tray. On a cafeteria tray. Yeah, it was brilliant. Cinematic masterpiece.
And even better, we discover that Bond was being chased by scum because they wanted the Aston Martin DB5, because there's some very important information inside of it. And who is chasing him and this is where we start riding off the rails, and this is why I don't think we can even consider considering this canon, not that we ever could anyway, Jaws.
Yes.
Except this is a version of Jaws that looks nothing like our Jaws, except that he's tall. He also is kind of fat, and he talks like a Goomba robot, and his entire lower jaw is now made of metal. And just no.
It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. What they did to a lot of the villains and henchmen in this cartoon is just awful. But yes, Jaws is one of the worst. I think there's one more that I consider worse even than Jaws. But it's just so bad. I mean, and at least they don't have him dressed too funny. He's just a random thug guy. He's not anything crazy. But yeah, he's got the whole metal mouth thing jaw going on, and it's razor sharp, spiky teeth, and it's not good. It's not good. And anybody who actually saw the movies with Jaws would be like, no, that's not who Jaws is. What's wrong with you? Of course, maybe it's Jaws' nephew who inherited his name.
I'm not leaning in that direction. If you want to get an idea of what he sounds like, just imagine the worst stereotype of a New York Italian mobster ever. speaking kind of like a robot, because he's got that very Goomba voice. So that's kind of what you're dealing with here.
It's really bad. It's really, really bad.
So, of course, now Scum really wants the car, but they need James Bond to take it off the Warfield grounds. So they contrive a way to get him off the grounds. But, of course, he's confined to the grounds. He's grounded. But he sneaks away from school because that's, of course, what all heroic children do. And they steal the DB5. But don't worry, because Gordo has a van.
Of course he does.
And he doesn't like Scum at all. He thinks that sounds yuckola.
What's that about?
That is an exact quote. Oh, and by the way, Scumlord, sorry, not White Cat, Small White Dog.
Yes.
Named Scumball. Apologies.
I was going to say, I thought the Scumlord was a dog guy, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
I did like the scene where Scumlord got mad and threw down his hat, and the dog grabbed it and that was fun.
For certain values of fun, I suppose we'll take what we can get. But long story short, they do take the car into an airplane after Tracy is, of course, locked in the car. A la Mary Goodnight, though not under such stupid circumstances, fortunately. And of course, we had to have it in a plane because James Bond would have to fly it out of plane.
Mm-hmm. Which he almost wasn't able to because the flight mode almost didn't engage.
But when in doubt, push a button.
But of course. But how did he get out of the trunk? Or was that
He used his special watch!
It is. That happened to have just the right tool to shoot their way out of the trunk.
Yes, fantastic. A saw and some rockets.
Yes.
And then, of course, we have Jaws dropping out of the plane into a barn, much like he dropped onto the circus tent in Moonraker. And when he drops into the barn, what does he jump into? Chickens. He loves chickens.
Oh, man.
You will never escape chickens.
He does love the chickens. He really, really does. Yeah, it's just so bad. I just can't even describe everything about this show.
The saddest thing about it is the Aston Martin DB5 is considered destroyed. But no worry. Uncle James, who fortunately does not actually appear on camera, sends James Bond Jr. a new car. It's a red convertible. How nice, Uncle James.
Aw, how sweet. I think it's important to point out, too, that the device that Scum thought was in the DB5 wasn't even there the entire time. So all of it was pretty much an exercise in futility, if you think about it. They could have just let him have the car. It wouldn't have mattered. All these kids risking their lives over a device that's not even in the car.
So that was episode 1, the beginning, which sets the tone, really, for the lovely adventure that's going to be James Bond Jr. And just so you know, folks, originally we were going to watch the first 10 episodes for you. Boy, are we glad we kept it down to 7. Again, not that we don't care about you.
There are limits to the amount of suffering we are willing to endure for a single episode. I mean, we might go back and revisit some more later.
Yeah, there are a lot of episodes. If we go at the same pace, we can do 8 episodes about James Bond Jr. Just think about that. It only ran 6 fewer episodes than all of the Jetsons.
Oh, jeez.
So there are lots of them.
Oh, man. That is absolutely insane, I have to say. But, yeah, so episode 1 really sets the tone. It really lets you know where the series is planning on going, the direction that they've chosen for it. You might think, as I tried to tell myself, hey, maybe it can only get better from here. But no, it could get worse, and it did.
Yes, and it did with episode 2, The Earthcracker. When we start with just James Bond Jr. and his friends just having a little picnic, when suddenly there's a tank, and there's a green laser that shoots at everybody. And who's driving the tank but Flava Flav? Except it's not Flava Flav, even though it's a guy in a tracksuit wearing lots and lots of bling around his neck, including a gigantic medallion. Okay, it's not a watch. And so maybe they're going for the Mr. T look, but anyone who's seen Flava Flav afterwards,
yes.
I mean, it's the Flava Flav look. And he's got big shades and a hat.
Mm-hmm.
A bowler hat.
Does he throw the hat?
He throws the hat.
This is the one I was talking about that I thought was a worse portrayal of a henchman even than Jaws. This version of Odd Job sucks.
And so now we're really off the rails because not only are we recycling henchmen in unbelievable ways, we're recycling henchmen who are dead.
Yes.
And so we have Flava Flav's Odd Job. Purple tracksuit, man. Really? Come on, Harold Sakata had more style than that.
way more style. Yeah, it's awful. It's got the big medallion, says OJ on it, so either Oddjob or Simpson. I'm not sure what they were going for with that. But, yeah, the tracksuit. Why? Why a tracksuit and a big gold chain? Like, what was the thought process there? When they were, like, watching Goldfinger and they go, okay, we like this character, Oddjob. We should bring him back. But let's make a few changes. I'm thinking, lose the nice suit. Purple tracksuit. That's where we're going with this.
Well, yeah, because we wanted to be hip for the kids, because we don't want to be like Squares,
Evidently. But, it's just...
Because we want them to be down with us.
At a certain point, you have to wonder why bother even using the names of the characters if you're going to change them so drastically to fit them into the cartoon. Because it wasn't a good throwback for those of us who had seen the movie. Like, I can imagine, like, maybe they're like, oh, okay, this is for the adults that are watching with their kids who actually know the movies. What is it, to slap them in the face? This is a slap in the face to the people who have actually seen the movies, is what this is. Yeah, it was awful.
However, you may have an argument for why they reuse the names, because when they come up with names on their own, they are the worst groan-inducing puns. For example, the guest damsel in distress for this one, which was the person whom Oddjob was supposed to be kidnapping from this particular picnic, and that would be Lotta De Niro. Think about that name. Lotta De Niro.
Yes.
Her father is a prominent archaeologist who may know the secret to where to find the city of El Dorado. The lost city of gold. Who might possibly want to find the lost city of gold?
No clue.
Especially since we already have Odd Flava Flav. As, of course, James Bond Jr. and his friends want to help Lotta De Niro rescue her father and have the opportunity to see the Peru the tourists always miss. So they go to Puerto Peru, and they indeed find that Lotta De Niro's father is being held captive by Goldfinger, who is also dead.
Goldfinger? I thought for sure it was Steve Irwin. But no, yes, it was Goldfinger somehow magically resurrected and jetting around with this crazy Flava Flav Oddjob.
Yeah, if you want to consider Goldfinger to be just any fat guy with a Panama hat, I mean, otherwise there's nothing there.
Yeah, it's just so bad. I just keep going back to that because, I mean, honestly, that's what I took away from this whole experience was, man, this was bad.
Yes.
Yeah, so you have Goldfinger searching for the lost city of gold because he wants to melt it down and take it.
Yes, and he has a giant laser called the Earthcracker, which he can use to split open mountains, because El Dorado is apparently hidden inside a mountain. Apparently it's in there, but it didn't get crushed. We don't ask. And so he just needs to know which mountain to blow up, which information he gets from Professor De Niro. And of course he will get the information because we have to see El Dorado. And so we find it, but not before James Bond Jr. introduces us to his pack mule, Moneypenny. He named the mule Moneypenny. Really?
Well, again, I think they were desperate to try to throw names in that the adults watching with their kids might recognize, but I don't think they gave it a lot of thought as to how it would actually affect anyone who was actually a fan of the series. Because that's just insulting, is what that is. I mean, yeah, that's just awful.
Yeah, and then we don't get into the problems of physics where you have James Bond Jr. and two of his friends put on top of a golden statue which is being melted with a laser from the bottom, and we just assume it's going to melt nice and evenly, so the statue's just going to slowly go down, as opposed to, it melting a little unevenly and toppling over and crap. No, we can't expect that to happen.
No.
But don't worry, the watch will save the day, because, of course, as the pun goes, James is not the burying kind. Told to Tracy, of course.
I forgot about that one.
And just because we want you to make sure we know this is Goldfinger, he has a big diorama model of Puerto Peru.
That was actually the best part, I thought. Like, when I saw that, he's like, check out this model of everything. I'm like, all right. At least they've got something true to one of these characters. It wasn't good, but, I mean, it was at least an actual throwback that made sense, as opposed to all the other ones that they tried to put in that just didn't hit the mark.
I have to agree, and that's showing how we're reaching for anything good here. So, anything else you want to think about with the Earthcracker, or do you just want to get it out of your mind?
Let's just move on. So, yeah, horrible Oddjob, bad Goldfinger, ridiculous, and rinse and repeat.
Yeah, which brings us to episode 3. And for a moment, I kind of, if it weren't for the dun 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 dun, I'd kind of wonder if I was actually watching James Bond Jr. because the opening looks like it belongs in a G.I. Joe cartoon. Because it looks like a dreadnought is breaking into a U.S. military base. Of course, it is the villain we will come to know as the Chameleon, who has micro motors implanted under the skin of his face. Ouch.
Yeah.
And these motors apparently make him able to disguise himself as anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Motors under his face.
Yes. Motors under his face totally would be able to make his body type and height and weight change along with his face, right? I mean, I'm just assuming. You know what? If a North Korean guy can turn into a rich white guy...
Knew you were going to go there.
Yeah, it's... I mean, at some point, you just... I guess they were trying to avoid introducing superpowers into the villains, but at the same time, you basically have a villain with superpowers because you're giving this guy the ability to not just disguise himself, to even just a sort of passable, like, oh, if they see me real quick and don't look close, they might think I'm this person, but like a perfect replica, including voice and body shape and somehow clothing magically without ever stripping the people that he's copying. It's kind of creepy.
But clothing is part of the plot, because what's he stealing from that military base? Nothing other than a 4-star general's uniform. That's it. Now, he can't go to a regular costume shop, apparently, where they make these all the time.
Mm-hmm.
No, he has to break into a military base to steal one.
Of course, totally.
And of course,
that's how I do it.
Meanwhile, we find out that the students of Warfield Academy are going to Washington, D.C. on a field trip. But not Tracy, because her passport's expired. Oh, no. I guess this means we're going to have to run into a lovely lady in D.C., aren't we? Of course we are. It's going to be a female lieutenant in the United States military who gives us the opportunity to see that Noseworthy is a male chauvinist. And of course, Bond is not a chauvinist.
No, he's totally cool.
Yep, and the way this comes about is Noseworthy makes comment about how women shouldn't be in the military, and Bond has no problem with it, so of course she gives him a ride. And they take a quick tour of DC. Isn't that nice? Oh, and by the way, the special gadget for this particular episode, it is a portable cassette player. A cassette player! And if you happen to have the headphones, you can monitor the homing signal from the cassette player.
Mm-hmm. But of course, which would come in handy if at any point James Bond Jr. got separated from the rest of his friends and they needed to find him. It's the only way it would really come in handy. So I guess I have to hope that happens in this episode.
And I guess you would also have to hope that because Noseworthy is so afraid of flying, IQ happened to make him some long johns that have a parachute in them, that even though they made it through the plane okay, that would happen to come in handy as well. Like, say if he and James Bond Jr. were pushed off the top of the Washington Monument, perhaps.
That would be fortunate. That would be really, really fortunate. So, hey,
good thing that happens then. While James has the special FM cassette player, while IQ still has the headphones. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah, because I always, like when I have a cassette player or an MP3 player, any type of music playing device, I often give the headphones to somebody else to hold for me so that I am not tempted to actually use it, I guess. I'm not sure. Actually, I can't even stretch that far. Oh, did you happen to mention this female Army lieutenant's name?
I did not.
It's another fantastic name from the writers of James Bond Jr. It's Lieutenant Shelley Casing. An Army lieutenant named Shell Casing.
Mm-hmm.
Shell Casing. That's not good.
And of course, she works for General Duke Armstrong.
Of course.
Because, manly 4-star general who looks like he permanently lives at Dunkin' Donuts. But and they are going to just be testing the prototype of Rats, the robot armored technical soldier, which is basically a mech warrior suit.
Yeah.
Looks like something out of Robotech.
Yeah, it was kind of a cross between one of those Robotech things and the power loader from Aliens. It had a little bit of that action going on to it. This thing is evidently impervious to everything. The giant laser beam from the tank, the rocket launcher, everything is...
Except for a sprinkler.
Exactly. Except for a little bit of water. They did all this. They made this thing they made it tank-proof. They made it able to bend the barrel of a tank gun back on itself, but they didn't bother to make the circuitry watertight? Really?
And literally, the way he defeats it is he turns on the ceiling sprinklers. And this is after, by the way, just driving through one gate at the conveniently located Pentagon main gate entrance, which has only one guard, with just a little piece of wood. He flips up, they drive past, and suddenly they're right in the middle of the Pentagon. Awesome.
Yeah. Maybe they're right in that center part that they filled in for some reason.
But, of course, that's not the most unbelievable thing about this episode. Even more unbelievable than the rats thing being impervious to everything but the sprinkler. There is one thing that's even more ridiculous. And anyone who has ever visited Washington, D.C. will be able to agree with this. They think that there's ample street parking in Washington, D.C. Are you effing kidding me? Yeah, just right in front of the building, wherever you want to go. Ample street parking, right there, not only for you, but also for the guy who's tailing you. Isn't that nice? And you don't have to parallel park or anything. It's the whole block's empty. No.
But of course.
There is no such thing as ample street parking in D.C. Not a chance.
Yeah, it's just so... I mean, okay, I keep having to tell myself, as I was watching this, and I was like, no, come on! It's a kid's cartoon. A lot of stuff happens in kids' cartoons that's not realistic in any way, shape, or form. But you know what? There was no need for them to drag the name of James Bond into this for this type of ridiculousness. They could have made this any group of kids. They could have made this anything.
Scooby-Doo!
The fact that they drugged the James Bond name through the mud for this show is what makes it so horrible for us. Otherwise, it would just be another bad 90s cartoon that, nobody has to watch if they didn't grow up during that time. But, Junior.
No, but instead, after, of course, James Bond gets a private tour of Washington, D.C. with Shelley Casing, we move on to episode 4, where we fortunately prove, as if we had any doubt, that the grand Ian Fleming tradition of cultural sensitivity and racial sensitivity is being preserved. So we are at Shifting Sands, which takes place on a field trip to Egypt. Man, I would love to go to this school and all these field trips all over the world, wouldn't you?
I don't know. They seem to get into a lot of crap every time they go on one of these field trips, so maybe I'd stay back with Tracy and hang out.
Oh, she gets to go on this one, but don't worry, she'll get separated from the crowd.
Yeah, of course. Yes, they get to visit Egypt.
And of course, they're under the guidance of, and you can take this into, they're a little more clever with the pun here because you have to, that it sounds like one thing and it is another. You start with Professor Giza, except it's pronounced so it sounds like Professor Geezer, and they're about to inspect. Isn't it nice how just foreign students on a field trip get to be present when a brand new tomb is opened? Well, yeah. Of course, it's not just any tomb. It's the tomb of Hip Hurrah.
Hip Hip Hurrah?
Just plain old Hip Hurrah.
Oh, okay.
Apparently he wasn't super hip. He was only a little hip. Should have
got an odd job over there to teach him some hip lessons.
There you go, the hippie shake. And of course, the first thing we find out is that there is a curse of violent death for whomever violates this tomb.
Dang it. Always.
So they open the sealed tomb, and what do they find? Already inside, there are tomb robbers who are working for none other than Pharaoh Pharaoh, who is our villain for this episode. He is the great times about a zillion grandson of Hip Hurrah.
Yes. Which, in a fun moment in the show, actually lets our heroes get away from his evil clutches because he is counting the number of greats that he is, the great whatever grandson, and he's literally tallying them on the wall. His guards fall asleep on him, and they get away.
And, as cheesy as that was, as predictable as that was, as soon as he got past the third grade, I was okay with it because I agree with you, that was the best part of the episode. Before that, of course, we're introduced to the one other student who happens to be along with our Warfield Academy students, and she is an Egyptian named Cleo Dawei.
Of course.
Wow. Cleo Dawei. Really? And at first she's very upset with them. And she lumps them in with people like Pharaoh Pharaoh because he sells our heritage to wealthy infidels like yourself. Yes, because we're so sensitive, that means that everyone who's actually Egyptian must think that everyone else is an infidel. Do you even know what an infidel is, person who wrote this episode? Do you know the various nuances of that and what has to go into it? Yeah.
It's probably
but of course, Gordo Lighter has one very poignant response to that. Whoa, Major Babe Alert. That's a quote.
I know. Oh, I forgot about that too. There's a lot of these episodes that I kind of blocked from my memory, but it's rough. Yeah, it's you get this sense that, and of course, it's all resolved by the end of the episode. Now she only thinks the actual infidels are infidels by the end, but right at the beginning there, she's like, "No, I don't like anybody who's not me."
Yeah, and of course, we also have that come along later. Well, Pharaoh Firo happens to have something like a submarine, except it tunnels underground. He calls it a subterranean. And, of course, Cleo and James end up getting captured inside of this, while meanwhile, the rest of the gang is stuck in the tomb, which is caved in because Trevor Noseworthy has played with IQ's latest invention, which causes a magnitude 6 earthquake.
Yes.
At the press of a button.
Yes, a little shovel that you put in the ground and push a button, and it causes a magnitude 6 earthquake. I can't even begin to imagine why anyone would think that was a good idea. Like, assuming that you could make it. I'm not even going to get into the physics of the actual device. Why would you think that was a good idea? What possible use could that be to be standing right where you're creating a magnitude 6 earthquake? Since obviously it's not a remote device, you have to be there and do it.
Unless you're one of these idiots who likes to strap explosives to themselves, I can't think of a good reason.
I knew no good was going to come from that. That was one of those devices that as soon as he showed, I'm like, this is going to cause them problems. This is not going to get them out of problems. I guarantee it. And
yes, but it also conveniently gets Tracy away while James is with Cleo DeWay. And when they're in the subterranean, which is taking them underground a very far distance till they get to Saudi Arabia. And when the subterranean gets a little too close to the surface, it knocks over a Bedouin's tent, who of course immediately says, "May 1,000 camels spit upon the infidel who does this." Really? And then James Bond Jr. and Cleo DeWay, after escaping in the aforementioned manner, come across this Bedouin, who then invites them to meet Allah very soon. Cultural sensitivity, we love it. But since they convince him that while they may be the only infidels in the desert, they're actually running from Pharaoh Firo, who's much worse, he says, "Oh, in that case, borrow one of my many million cars." And Pharaoh Firo's agents run because we have a bunch of cars with people with swords standing on the hoods, coming at their heavily armed device.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Because they actually designed the device. It was the same people who designed the RATS device. So they knew that they're like, oh crap, we can defend against guns and missiles and rockets and lasers and everything else, but it's not sword proof. If they get near us with those swords, we're done. That's my guess.
But of course, James Bond Jr. saves the day and stops Pharaoh Firo, rescues his compatriots from the tomb before it runs out of air, and even reveals that the mummy, yes, there was a mummy in the tomb, is Mr. Carswell. No, it's Pharaoh Firo's brother.
The amusement park owner? This one definitely had the heaviest. All of these episodes have a bit of a Scooby-Doo vibe to them. This one went all out with it. They literally went. I mean, all they needed was that mummy to say, "I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for you meddling kids," and we would have gone full Scooby-Doo on this episode. It was blatant. It was really bad.
It was. But after the desert, we move on and we go to the sea for episode 5, Plunder Down Under.
Plunder Down Under, which has nothing to do with Australia, oddly enough.
Of course not. No, we're more in the neighborhood of Greece.
Yes.
And it turns out that Tracy's favorite uncle is the captain of a ship, which gets pulled underwater by a mysterious sea monster, which of course isn't a sea monster, it's a mechanical device. That mechanical device is owned by Walker D. Plank. Really?
Like you said, as much as I bitch about them moving the Bond villains into this universe poorly, it's still far and away better than when they create their own villains, because you have this pirate in the James Bond universe.
Yes, a redheaded mohawked pirate
named Walker D. Plank. It's so bad.
And he even talks like "yar" and all that crap.
Oh, he's full on pirate. Yeah, he's
got a singing bird, yo ho ho, and a sub full of scum.
Yep, he's going the full Blackbeard on us. Definitely, yeah.
And of course, for his henchmen, he chooses Jaws.
Of course, I mean, makes sense.
And he does actually have. I had almost allowed myself to forget this, but I'm sure Eric wouldn't let me forget. Go on. You want to say it.
Are we talking about the mechanical shark?
You're talking about the mechanical shark.
Yes, he has a mechanical shark. That was probably his best quality, is the fact that he had the foresight to have a mechanical shark, at least. I mean, not that he really got to use it, but...
So the mechanical shark is a submarine that he uses to eat, quote-unquote, intruders and bring them back to his lair. And, of course, they escape in the mechanical shark. But yes, mechanical shark. Mechanical shark.
Oh, yeah.
Just for Eric. Which is much, much better than the gnarliest video game ever, because Gordo, being high-tech and all, has a pocket video game.
That's right, I forgot how they got out of this one, yes.
A pocket video game called Ship Ahoy.
Yes, which just happens in this episode to be nautical-based, of course.
So that way, all that IQ has to do is take a transmitter, put it on the Ship Ahoy game, and suddenly Gordo can control all of Walker D. Plank's secret fleet.
Yep.
And prevent him from using it to wreak havoc upon the world.
Hey, how else were they going to stop him? Okay, he had a bunch of ships, all under remote control, so he didn't have to have crews on any of them. So, if you got a better way for them to get out of it... It was another case of just ultra convenience. Like, okay, we're going to have Gordo playing this video game the entire time, and it happens to be a game about ships. And then we're going to somehow contrive that, the bad guy is remote controlling all of his ships. And so, of course, IQ is going to be able to take control and give that control to Gordo on his little video game.
Yeah.
It's perfect sense.
And by the way, I came up with a drinking game that will keep everybody sober.
Uh-oh.
You have to take a drink. If you watch an episode and at no time do you hear a name that makes you go, really? On the converse side, if you'd like to get nice and drunk, every time you hear a name that makes you pause, really? Go ahead. That's your other drinking game. That's the one that'll get you drunk.
There you go. Won't necessarily give you alcohol poisoning, but it'll get you messed up quick.
Yes. And really, that's all I have to say about Plunder Down Under. Do you have anything to add to this? Mechanical
shark.
Mechanical shark. Which is way more cool than the first thing that we discover in episode 6, A Chilling Affair, where we find out that our villain is Dr. No, again, not dead.
Yeah, somehow. And
he may not have an open pit nuclear reactor this time, but don't worry, he's green.
Yep. At least, the one good thing is they gave him the mechanical hands, so on the one hand, it was a little more true to the book, right?
But he's green, and he has a misshapen head, and as you described, he looks like a Martian Fu Manchu.
It's that was my first thought. When he came on the screen, I was like, who's this guy? Why are they fighting Martians now? And then they introduced him as Dr. No, and I was like, no, this is not Dr. No. What are you doing here?
And I don't even want to think about the cultural implications of the green skin.
Yeah, as far as I recall, I don't think they explained it in any way. They didn't say he was in like an industrial accident or... I don't get it. They don't really point it out. So I guess we're supposed to assume that he's alien of origin or something. But yes, our Dr. No in the animated series is a green Fu Manchu with mechanical hands.
Yes. And in this episode, he takes the cryogenically frozen body of a criminal who hid $50 million worth of treasure just before being frozen. And his plan is to unfreeze the guy and get him to tell him where the treasure is hidden, recover the treasure, kill the guy so he can keep it all for himself. Sure. Why not? Meanwhile, our friends at Warfield Academy, IQ has just built a device that will kind of control anything. It's a glove, and it'll remote control anything that you point it at, except it doesn't work very well. It fails all the time. Like, for example, when he points it at an ATM and he wants only to withdraw 20 pounds, it ends up withdrawing everything. Aww. Except, of course, he thinks this is a problem. How kind of him.
Yeah, I noticed it was funny because he first tested on the vending machine. He wants to get a soda out of the vending machine, but he says, remind me to pay for this afterwards. Why bother just really, you're going over the top with the, hey, by the way, these are the good guys. These are the good guys. Don't forget, these are the good guys. They would never steal anything. Even to the point where after all that money comes out of the ATM later on, he's like, I managed to get all the money back into the ATM. What? And he points out that he was using the glove to withdraw 20 pounds from his account.
Yes.
So you want to make sure he's not intending to use this for any evil purposes whatsoever.
Of course not, because having children commit crimes is wrong. And speaking of committing crimes, we have our Dr. No, going for the classic, as we discovered in an episode we had a while ago where we talked about the Fu Manchu films, or at least one of them, the only one I'm going to subject you to. but it is the generic plot of all of them. He has a scientist whom he needs to kidnap to get his evil plot in motion. In this case, he needs to kidnap Dr. Frost, who is an expert in cryogenics.
With a name like
he
that, you
needs
pretty
this
much
expert
have
in
to,
cryogenics to
right?
unfreeze this guy. However, in order to make Dr. Frost talk, he also needs to kidnap his daughter so he can threaten the scientist's daughter. So the scientist will then do what he wants.
It really is seeming like that visual of an alien Fu Manchu is less of an accident, more and more every second, doesn't it?
Doesn't it, though? Yes, it is the classic Fu Manchu plot. And while James Bond Jr. does prevent the girl from being taken at first, and this would, by the way, make her the first Bond girl named Frost. We had a second one in Die Another Day. I admit I prefer the one from Die Another Day, the only preference I'll ever have from that movie, by the way. And there is one cool moment in this episode. I will say there is actually one cool moment. And it actually involves James Bond Jr. kind of torturing somebody, which is kind of crossing the edge for a nice teenage guy. Mm-hmm. They go to a sushi bar.
Yes.
You see a guy preparing fugu, which, as we have explained in a previous episode, is that lovely blowfish that they make in Japan, which you have to sign a waiver for before you eat, because if you prepare it wrong, it will kill you.
Yep.
Well, this agent of scum who is undercover at the sushi bar was cutting up some fugu, and James Bond Jr. catches him as an agent of scum, and then cuts some of the fugu himself, holds it in front of the guy's mouth, and says, "Talk or eat." And the guy is assuming, I'm going to die. So he talks. And just to show that he wasn't really going to kill him, because that would be bad, we then see James Bond Jr. eat the fugu just fine.
And he says, delicious. I will admit, for just a moment, I was like, whoa, this went dark. I like this. Hey, we're getting somewhere here now. When he starts doing that, I'm like, he is actually threatening to murder this guy to get information. Like, this is James Bond right here. All right. And then, delicious. I'm like, oh, come on. We could have just left it to our imagination, one way or the other. Just toss it to the side and leave it be. But no, we had to prove that James Bond never actually had that man's life in danger.
Of course. And then we go on to the port where he is being held over a pit of dark brown liquid nitrogen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which,
though? To be fair, scientists don't really know what color liquid nitrogen is. They've never seen. Oh, wait, no, they have, and it's not that.
All he has to do is drop his watch, which has a heat beam in it, into the liquid nitrogen. And, of course, the watch won't be frozen by the liquid nitrogen instantly. No! It'll activate the heat beam, which will boil it all away. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay.
Of course.
And then, this being Dr. No's facility, we have to escape through the vents. Mm-hmm. And then in order to fool Dr. No, since we can't actually revive this cryogenically frozen dude, he asks the women present for all the makeup in their purses so that IQ can be disguised as Edward G. Robinson. So he can say, yeah, see, I'll tell you where it all is. Yeah, see? And it just goes on from there. While the whole time, Trevor Noseworthy has been trying to prove that James Bond Jr. has been off campus, unauthorized, but don't worry, he will get back in time for the science exam with only 007 seconds to spare.
But of course. Yeah, this one, I think with the Fu Manchu aspects, it came the closest to having at least a fairly fun storyline compared to all the other episodes. It still wasn't good. I'm not going to even stretch that in any way, shape, or form. But, with the knowledge of the Fu Manchu movies, you can at least watch it and say, oh, okay, I see where they're going with this. And it's not as bad as the others. But don't think that that's a trend, because we do have another episode to talk about.
Yes. And, of course, speaking of trends, Tracy was left behind on campus, so James Bond Jr. could flirt with Frost's daughter. Mm-hmm. But anyway.
Of course.
Episode 007, Nothing to Play. It actually starts off, again, with its coolest moment, which is really creepy and crosses a line. You see this creepy-looking baby doll, and there's this really, really creepy-looking fat dude behind it, and this baby doll is stalking this guy. And we are informed that you don't want to upset this baby doll, because if you upset the baby doll starts to cry. And when the baby doll cries, the tears are nitric acid. And they will cry and cry and cry until you're burned to death. That was actually kind of cool. Only cool part of the entire episode.
It quickly went downhill from there, that's for sure. So basically we have the bad guys are creating these evil toys, which they plan to disseminate around the world and then remotely control to take over.
Yes, and even though we never, at least I didn't pick it up, figure out who the fat guy is really supposed to be, even though he seems to be the brains of the operation. Who is his partner in this venture?
Walker D. Plank, sorry.
Yar. Which makes complete sense because a pirate guy absolutely makes sense taking over a toy factory in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. When I think of toys, I immediately think of pirates. Wait, no, I don't at all. Well, maybe they were knockoffs. Maybe they were pirated toys.
Wow.
Too much of a stretch.
You've been listening to too many names from this series. These puns are getting bad. We're sorry.
It
Meanwhile,
is really rough.
Back at Warfield, IQ has created yet another special glove, and this one actually works. Or does it? We'll find out. Meanwhile, there's a little festival, and James is taking Tracy there on a date. And of course, he wins the shooting gallery, gets her a prize bear. The bear falls apart, and there's a note inside from somebody who says, "Please, I'm being held captive. Help me and my daughter."
How convenient is this? I mean, obviously all Bond stories have some element of convenience somewhere along the line where somebody gets lucky, and that's what leads them to where they've got to be. This is so far out of the realm of any type of reasonable believability that it just boggles the mind completely. You have this guy is trapped in a toy factory being forced to create killer toys, so he writes a note and hides it in a stuffed bear that somehow manages to make its way into James Bond Jr.'s hands, and nobody else's.
And James Bond Jr. can read Chinese.
Of course, yes, he speaks fluent Mandarin. But, yeah, what? Really? That is such a gigantic stretch. That's such a gigantic leap that it's just like you couldn't have found any other way for Bond Jr. to have found a way to found out about this. And there couldn't have been anything else. No distress call, nothing else. They couldn't have been taking a field trip to a toy factory in Hong Kong, maybe. I don't know. Something other than this stuffed bear.
Yes, but the stuffed bear does lead them to Hong Kong, which they go to unauthorized.
Of course.
And Trevor Noseworthy happens to notice they're going and wants to catch them in the act. And so he actually says his one good line so far in the entire series. Did 5 obnoxious teenagers just come here and purchase tickets? To which he gets a reply in the affirmative and says, I'll take the next flight. He flies after them just to tattle on them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Got more money than sense, evidently, which seems to be going around these days, so it's all right.
So they find the toy designer's daughter, who is unharmed. She is at her own home. And beforehand, we get this fun little exchange. What, you aren't afraid of a little excitement, are you, Tracy? No, James, I'm afraid of you and some knockout Chinese girl. Wow. Just, wow.
Which this kid ends up being, what is she, like 6, 7, something like that?
Exactly, which means she can't be left alone, so we have to leave Tracy with her.
Yes.
Because, of course, the woman does the babysitting.
Mm-hmm.
Of course. And so James Bond Jr. and his remaining crew go to the toy factory to rescue her father, but it's too late. The toys are already starting to ship, and when you get several of these small toys together, they transform into a gigantic toy, Devastator, made up of Constructicons. No, sorry.
Voltron? Oh, no, it's not it.
And they're going to use it to rob the Bank of Hong Kong. But don't worry, you know that malfunctioning glove IQ had? Well, it's still there, and if they throw it at this giant robot's mouth, it goes berserk, apparently.
As one does.
That saves the day.
Yeah. Well, when I eat a malfunctioning electronic glove that's supposed to control things, I go a little crazy too. So, I mean, to be fair.
If you want to eat a malfunctioning electronic device, that is your business, and I won't ask about it.
It's not the eating it that's the hard part. It's the part that comes later.
Wow. And on that note, that is the first 007 episodes of James Bond Jr. Any other thoughts you have about this lovely cartoon that we may or may not revisit at some point?
it was really, really bad. And I mean, even trying to look at it through, like, obviously looking at it now, you know, as an adult and as, you know, in the future, looking back at this, it's easy to say, oh, this is just really, really bad. But, you know, yes, it was very similar to other cartoons of its time. However, other cartoons of its time were not dragging the James Bond franchise into it. So I expect more from something with the James Bond name attached to it. And it really, really didn't hit the mark. And what really stinks about it is it's not even bad enough to be so bad it's good. It doesn't even reach that level of parody, except for a couple of scenes here and there. But it's really, really hard to watch. Now, if you do want to watch it, if you want to subject yourself to what we subjected ourselves to, the entire series, I believe, is available on YouTube. You can just search it out and you can find it easily and go for it. Have a blast.
Yeah, go ahead. Give it a shot if you really, really feel like it.
I heavily suggest having shots while doing it. That might help, actually.
I think it would help a lot. And, of course, not only was there the James Bond Jr. cartoon series, which ran for a long time. Well, basically, it ran for, what was it, how many episodes?
60-something episodes, right?
Yeah, 60-some episodes. And 91, I think the last episode aired in 93. There were a couple of novelizations that came out based on James Bond Jr., and there was also an NES video game of James Bond Jr., so they were very keen about cashing it in. However, once we got to the point, we can make GoldenEye. Screw this noise. We're done.
Yep. Thankfully, because that was so much better in so many ways.
Indeed.
But, yeah. So if you want to give it a look, maybe just watch a couple episodes. If you're a fan of that type of cartoon series from the early 90s, then hey, maybe you'll enjoy it far more than we did.
Maybe.
But yeah, it wasn't good. It was bad.
No, it was bad. It was really, really bad. That said, if you do watch it and want to share your thoughts with us, by all means, you can give us a shout. You can find me on the Twitter at CinemaOTR. You can also email me directly at ziggy@cinemaontherocks.com.
I'm available on Twitter at Eric J. Dewey. You can also email me, eric@hermajestiespod.com. And, of course, you can feel free to visit our website and comment on the post directly there at hermajestiespod.com.
How about that? We try to make it so easy for everyone.
We do. We really do.
Which is much more than we can say for the people who made the next item we're going to talk about.
That is correct. So, yes, this game... That's the next item we're going to talk about is a video game out on multiple platforms. I believe it's on PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, Nintendo DS, and, of course, the Windows PC version, which is what we both played.
Yes, and that is James Bond 007 Bloodstone, which came out in November of 2010. It's supposed to take place a little bit after Quantum of Solace, a few years after. Go figure. Makes sense. It actually stars Daniel Craig and Judi Dench doing the voices of Bond and M, respectively. So you got to give major points for that, and that makes you sit up and take notice, really. And then our special guest star as our female love interest, as opposed to the male love interest, which we haven't been brave enough to do in the James Bond series yet. That would be Joss Stone, who is known more as a singer. In fact, she does the theme song for the game. And because we would like to give you just a little bit of rest and clear the palate after talking about all that nastiness that was James Bond Jr., we're going to let you have a listen to the theme song from James Bond 007 Bloodstone, performed by Joss Stone, which does not, of course, include the title of the game in the song, because that would be no fun.
Yes, this is much, much, much better than the previous song we made you listen to. It's a little bit longer, though, so enjoy, and we'll be right back after it plays.
Mission is your destiny's hidden. Keep a conscious mind. Put your all of my soul. Cut through it all. Pay attention, you'll find you can bring the blown high. I'll catch you if you crawl. So stand tall. We're face to face. Now let's play. As long as I try, I don't mind. I'll take it all. Whatever plans you make, there's no escaping time. Be sure to make no mistake. Let go of fate and be mine.
Right. Not too shabby. That's actually a pretty good track. Not the best ever, I would say, but definitely pretty decent for a video game.
Though I will say that I could have used more real instrumentation rather than what's a lot of the obvious electronic stuff in the back. But overall, hey, I'm not gonna complain, especially after what we just heard before this.
Exactly. Yeah. So not a bad soundtrack. Pretty decent storyline, for a video game, I think. But then you get into actually playing it. Wow. Now, admittedly, I'm not much of a gamer. Anybody who listens to my other show, Socially Awkward, knows that. So I'm already kind of starting at a disadvantage, but it was really, really tough to get into the gameplay on this one for me. How did you fare with it?
I'm a bit more experienced of a gamer. I've been playing for a long time. We won't quite say how long. And I've been doing MMOs, first-person shooters, strategy games, role-playing games. This actually fits into the genre that I tend to like the most, where it's immersive roleplay, where you're actively becoming the character going through a story. And so I was excited about this game. And because I wanted to have us look at one of the James Bond video games, and I was looking for one that we could both play, because the one thing is I tend to be, at this point in time, almost exclusively PC gaming. The only console I have is a Nintendo Wii. So anything that's exclusively PlayStation or Xbox, while Eric can play an Xbox, I can't. I don't think either of us has a PlayStation.
Nope.
So I had to pick one that we could both play. So found this one. The storyline seemed interesting. It seemed to be the genre that I really like, and I know Eric found it. Eric was intrigued by the idea, so this is the one we picked up. And granted, I'll give full disclosure here. In most ratings of the game, out of the 4 platforms that it's available for, Nintendo DS, PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and Nintendo DS, it's rated an average of about 75 out of 100 on the DS platform. And then he goes steadily down. Yeah. So its worst rating is the way we played it as a PC game.
Exactly. Now, it got pretty, I would say, above average ratings. If you look at it, the DS version got a 75%, which is okay. And then it goes down from there, jumps down to 66% for the PS3, and then 64 and 63 for the 360 and the PC. So it does take evidently the DS version was a lot better than all the other platform versions. But the console versions were a little bit better than the PC version.
And I'm willing to buy that. And so as I critique, you can take some of the aspects that I'm going to talk about with that in mind, but I think at its core, it's still flawed. Now, again, mechanics, you have Daniel Craig doing the voiceovers for the James Bond character. He did not actually do the motion capture. It was done by his usual stunt double. So stunt double doubled again. He's listed as the stunt coordinator for the game. Judi Dench does the voice of M, so they really went high class for that. Mm-hmm. Not saying Daniel Craig isn't high class, just, he's not Sir Daniel Craig yet. Whereas we have Dame Judi Dench.
Exactly.
And then we got Joss Stone, again, known normally for singing, but she has done some acting. She was in Aragon. This was the last attempt she made at acting as far as her current resume goes. She's been back to primarily music. By the way, the other musician for that theme song was David Stewart. You may know him as the Half Eurythmics nobody talks about. But the storyline, you start off in order to orient yourself to the game with your pre-credit sequence. And I like that they built the movie... they built the game in a movie style. So you're playing with the pre-credit sequence where you have James Bond doing the very quick mission. You have the theme song, which we heard already, which plays over a Bond credit style sequence. And then you get into the major plot. Though instead of being split into 3 acts like most things are, this is split into, I think it's 5. Which is kind of odd storytelling, but that's okay. It allows for globetrotting and so on and so forth. In our opening sequence, we have a meeting of 20 world leaders in Greece, and there's a terrorist who plans on blowing them all up at the time that they get their group photo taken.
As one does.
Yeah, and the local security doesn't believe this is going to happen, so it's up to Bond. So this is the part you got to experience firsthand somewhat. Your thoughts, sir?
It wasn't horrible. Now, I will admit that evidently my computer could not really handle the game full speed. I thought it felt very slow and clunky, but then I was going back and watching some of the gameplay that other people have done and recorded, and it was not. It was very much quicker. So I'm thinking that my computer was slowing things down quite a bit.
Now, full disclosure on that, Eric's computer meets the requirements listed on the game box.
Yes, it does.
So it's either false advertising or something.
Right.
But
yeah, exactly. Because it did play, but it was very choppy. It was very slow, responsive. I would have to, I would be clicking several times and be like, why isn't it shooting? Why isn't it shooting? And then all of a sudden, pew, pew, pew. I'm like, oh, dang it. Like, I only wanted to shoot once, but it didn't shoot the first time I clicked, so I had to click more. And I think that was a symptom of my computer not being able to handle it. But as it stated, my computer does have the specifications that say meet the requirements, so it should have played. So I didn't get very far in the game at all. I got through that first opening sequence, but then it kept freezing on me trying to save after that. So I think I played through that half a dozen times and then kind of gave up on it. But what I did find, it did seem like the game mechanics were a little clunky to me. But again, as a non-gamer, I don't know how accurate that really is. I mean, they felt clunky to me, which might mean that somebody who's familiar with these type of games would find it just fine. But navigating and trying to move around and then aim and shoot, and it didn't feel very intuitive to me, and it was difficult to pick up. Even playing through the same level several times, I still had moments where I was like, wait, what am I supposed to do here? What am I, So it was, to me, clunky and because of my computer, unresponsive. So not very fun.
And I got farther than Eric, and I will say that even though I like to play games like this, I've played lots of games like this, games that are supposed to be built on the same type of controls and mechanics and so on, I found it clunky. I mean, I was active, and it starts to not be fun, because a game, you're supposed to enjoy yourself. That's why it's called a game. When you are dropping F-bombs constantly at the inanimate pixels in front of you, that's a problem. And there were several points during the game where I was just swearing at it up a storm because it was just so damn clunky. The interface and it was awful. And even if I remapped the keys, because I tried that, like, okay, let's do something where it's a bit more comfortable hand position. It didn't matter. It's not a matter of key placement. It's a matter of just how the controls respond. And my machine is over-engineered. So it was not choppy. It was handling things just fine. The only problem I had, and this is a widely documented problem with the PC version, so if you guys try it, and it's really cheap if you look for it online, you can get it for $5 or less. So it's not that hard to find if you want to give it a shot. Is that if you're playing it on the PC, only use onboard sound, AC97 type codec. I have a more sophisticated sound card, and the sound just echoes, chops, all that sort of, and it is a known bug with the program, and there's no way around it except to basically dumb down your sound as much as possible. In fact, the game was built for the AC97 codec, so basically just use your onboard sound. If you have a sound card, bypass it. And then you'll be able to get it to play. And I got that to work, so everything played fine. It's just the controls were really, really clunky. And I found that for shooting, the mechanics that they chose for shooting, I understand adding recoil for realism. However, the recoil on this is so ridiculous that, okay, you aim your weapon and then you press to shoot, and before you even have the chance to experience recoil because it hasn't shot yet, just the act of pulling the trigger screws up your aim. So I found the aiming controls very clunky. Now, if you could do some hand-to-hand takedown moves against a villain, as you do those, you build up focus points. And apparently this is similar to something that was done in the Splinter Cell games, which I admit I have not played. And as you have focus points, you can then do focus takedowns, which then allow you to aim with your other weapons, so your Walther or your MP5 or grenade launcher or AK-47, whatever alternate weapon you pick up, because you could switch off between two. You always have your handgun, and then you have something more powerful. And if you have these focus points built up from hand-to-hand takedowns, then you can hit an extra key into a focused aim, so you can do a one-shot headshot, that type of thing. So there is that mechanic in there, but otherwise the shooting mechanics I thought were kind of awkward, clunky. When it comes to healing, there's no such thing as a health potion or anything. You just have to get into cover and stay in cover long enough without getting shot, and your health recovers. As far as a health bar, nah, it's just the screen will flash red until you're healthy again. But the thing that really bothered me most in terms of controls was driving. And I think, Eric, this is where you mentioned you just kind of said hell with it during the boat chase, right?
Yeah, it was awful. It was really hard to control, and you're also supposed to be shooting and doing everything else. So it's like, I lost it so many times, and it was unbelievably difficult.
And this is the part where I started dropping F-bombs at the screen. The boat I managed to get after a few tries, but then as you get to the car, and it's not that the course is necessarily difficult. I can understand what I'm supposed to do in it. It's just the mechanics, again, of actually executing the maneuvers. And I say this as someone who's experienced with gaming, not just in terms of the ones where you walk around, but also driving, like Spy Hunter. Of course, classic game based on James Bond in wink, wink, nod, nod fashion. Not just the original box arcade, but they also had the remake that came out roughly, I think 5 years before Bloodstone came out. That's a driving and shooting, basically same mechanics in terms of how the game is supposed to work, but much better executed. And since driving is supposed to be a major element of this game, I think they could have put more into it, make it a bit more of a smooth ride, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But they didn't. My major complaint, other than working out the driving, and I was literally at the point where I was about to quit the game if I didn't make this one drive one more time, and then I made it through. But I almost rage quit on it. I admit it. I almost rage quit. I didn't, but I came real close. But the thing that bothers me most is that the game plays on rails. And I don't mean it by the strict definition on rails of where, like in an old school Atari side-scroller where you're always moving, you can't control that. All you can control is the one axis of movement, and then everything always moves around you. But it's more a matter of there is only one thing you're supposed to do, one way you can play it. There is no freedom of movement. There's no freedom of action, no freedom of choice. You have to do it one way in one path, and that's it. When you get to a point of character interaction, you don't control the conversation. You don't even get to make meaningless decisions about how the conversation is going to go, but it ends up with the same result. No, you just go to a cutscene. And when you get to major action sequences during a chase, you don't get to decide whether to do the cool jump through an explosion. No, it breaks to a miniature cutscene. So boss fight? There's no boss fight. It's a cutscene. And it gets to the point where you're just a rat in a maze and you have to go one direction. And I didn't feel there was any freedom there. It stopped being fun relatively quickly. And it ended up being repeating the same thing over and over again with no illusion of variety. Because, of course, I know that in terms of the nuts and bolts of gaming, in the background, the same thing is happening all the time. But a good game designer will make you not feel like it's happening all the time. But it's like, okay, run, chase, drive sequence. Run, chase, drive sequence. Cutscene. It just feels like you're doing the same damn thing over and over and over again. And it just got so repetitive that I made it halfway through the second act after the credits. Mm-hmm. So you have the credit sequence in Greece, then you have a sequence in Turkey that takes a much longer time, and then you end up going to Monaco. That's where you meet Joss Stone, or Nicola Hunter as she's called. And about halfway through, it's like, I'm just getting bored to death. Yeah. And there's a small puzzle aspect, but it's the same puzzle every time. And it's a 3D lock tumbler thing. The perspective on it is kind of wonky. So as you're moving the tumbler, you actually change your perspective. So it kind of, again, mechanically clunky. But the main problem I have with it is the on-rails thing, where it doesn't feel like I'm actively participating. And you can say that, well, it's because of when the game was made. But no, you play something like the Mass Effect games, where they all go in one direction, but there's still some freedom of choice there. You can affect the outcome, and it feels like you're doing something different. And even the standard I'm holding this game to is from a game 10 years older than that. In fact, 12 years older. It was made to run on Windows 98. There was a game version of Blade Runner where you had multiple conversations. The action was actually just about as smooth. The graphics were just about as good. I mean, how did you feel when you saw the graphics? I thought Daniel Craig and Judi Dench mock-ups looked kind of creepy, like Melting Wax Museum.
Yeah, it did. I mean, granted, is not a big gamer myself. I thought they were okay, especially since the majority of the games I play are what are considered retro now. So it's definitely above that level. But I didn't think that it wasn't stunning, and especially when it was the cutscenes, when it wasn't even gameplay. I was like, well, I know that at this time they should have been able to do better.
And looking at the story, I like the concept. I love the concept where basically you're dropped into a James Bond movie as James Bond. Great. And I just think it could have been done better. I think there could have been more done with it. I know there have been other James Bond games that have explored a little bit more that are supposed to be better than this one. We may explore those later. But in terms of just playing through this game, I just stopped having fun, and I didn't really feel like coming back to it. Now, I might get back to it later, but for the purpose of this episode, I've looked at the plot because, of course, we do spoilers. And looking at the plot, it looks like there's no point to it, because as far as I was getting, it at least felt like it was going somewhere, because you have James Bond finding out about this bioweapons threat. And so he starts to investigate, looking to who has the formula to activate these awful bioweapons. And then, of course, he doesn't quite manage to keep the formula from falling into the wrong hands. So now he has to stop the person who took them. And he does that through our femme fatale, Nicola Hunter, played by Joss Stone, and finds out that it's this Russian guy who has this factory in Siberia. And we think, okay, this is going to be the plot. But it turns out that only takes you halfway through the game. So have you read the spoilers for the whole thing?
I've skimmed through. I did see the very last thing on there. I was like, oh, well, that's sad. But I just kind of skimmed it.
Okay, because I looking through the spoilers, okay, you get to the point where he's in the Siberian factory, which even mathematically should be the third act, but it turns out that nope, all of this was a hoax, just because somebody wanted that Russian guy dead. So we're kind of stealing from Living Daylights at that point, a little bit. So then James Bond kind of has to figure out what's going on with that, contacts more people, gives him a chance to go to Geneva, Thailand, so on, and Burma. And we end up finding out when all is said and done. And we never find out, as far as I can tell anyway, if Bloodstone is anything other than a cool couple of words somebody thought of for a title. But it turns out that the girl betrayed him. She's the one who orchestrated the whole thing, and it was to impress a man. But we never find out who, because she gets killed, and the game ends. So apparently they meant for a sequel to happen. I'm not excited for it.
Well, on the bright side, if there is a sequel, it would be made by somebody else, because Activision no longer has the rights to the Bond games. So if somebody were to make a sequel, which I don't even know if that's possible, I don't know if they have the rights to this, if somebody else came along and made the game who did have the rights, if they'd be able to go back to this. But there won't be a sequel to Bloodstone from Activision, for sure.
Yeah, and I found the gameplay to be clunky, and while the story was kind of engaging to the point where I took it, knowing where it goes, I'm kind of glad that I didn't end up paying full price for this when it first came out.
I did speak to a couple of friends of mine who are avid gamers and have actually played this on the consoles. A friend of mine has played it on the Xbox 360, and he said basically the same thing. He said in comparison to other first and third-party shooters, the controls were very clunky and slow responding and harder to intuit than other games of similar genres. So, hey, take that for what you will, but other gamers, actual gamers, have said the same thing. So I have to say, I would be kind of interested in maybe trying the DS version, because I am a fan of handheld games as well. It's something to do when you're otherwise indisposed. So I wouldn't mind giving that a shot maybe sometime. I'd have to get a DS, but
Well, I'm sure you can find those cheap now too.
yeah, especially now that they've got the newer ones out and everything else. So might be something to look into. I get most of my mobile gaming fixed from my phone, so I'm good on that front. But if I happen to come across one at a Bookman's or thrift store or something like that for cheap, I might go for it.
Yeah, and of course this game was not designed with little kids in mind, but basically teenagers on up. I mean, you're not really going to run into anything awfully offensive as long as once you get to the point where you're playing with games with guns, you know what you're getting into.
Yeah.
So
it is rated T for teen, so it's not an M for mature game. The amount of blood is very, very small if you're concerned about the blood and gore type of aspect of these type of things. There's a tiny little bit, when you shoot somebody, you see a tiny little spray. And when you're getting shot, obviously the red on the screen, which is supposed to indicate your blood, I suppose. But
and it's just the fact that the screen flashes red. It's not that you're got sores everywhere or anything.
Yeah.
The screen flashes red. And when you finally die, the screen will just kind of scroll over red, and that's it.
Yeah, so it's not a gory game. It's very low-key. I mean, obviously, it's a James Bond game, so you have the violence aspect of it. This is not for little kids, but I would have no problem letting my daughter play this, and she's 14. I would have no problem letting her play it if she wanted to. She's way more into games than I am, so she probably wouldn't want to, though.
Well, you never know. She might get farther than you.
She probably would. I can almost guarantee that. The question is, would she give up at the same point that you did? Be like, never mind, Dad, this isn't fun.
Yeah. Like I said, maybe I'll revisit it at some point, but I'm sure there are other games out there.
Yeah.
So that is James Bond 007 Bloodstone. So we've now talked about a cartoon and a video game. So now we have to move on to a kid's book.
Yes. This is the one I've been
nothing says
for.
Kid's book like functional alcoholic, sex maniac assassin.
Of course. But not just any type of kid's book. Tell the folks what type of kid's book this is.
It's not from the official series Choose Your Own Adventure, but it is a Choose Your Own Adventure type book.
This is from
a series called Find Your Fate. So basically a knockoff Choose Your Own Adventure type book. Because you had Choose Your Own Adventure and which were the two big ones. Choose Your Own Adventure was the big one, Which Way was the other one. Then there was also a series Time Machine, and then there's Find Your Fate. And they weren't all James Bond books. They also did some Indiana Jones books. They tended to go for commercial tie-ins. And there were 4 of these Find Your Fate books that came out at the time of A View to a Kill. Now, it's interesting that if you look at the covers of these, they're marketed, they're published by Ballantine, they're marketed as Ballantine Young Adult. Yeah, folks, these were marketed to grade school kids, okay? I promise they were marketed to grade school kids. Just like the rest of the Choose Your Own Adventure books, they were put in the exact same place in the store, and So you have your sex maniac assassin actually doing sex maniac assassin things. In fact, I remember being intrigued by the interactions with Paula Ivanova as I was reading these books back when they came out. So what we're going to do here for your personal enjoyment, we have taken one of these Find Your Fate books based on the sensational new 007 film, A View to a Kill. James Bond in Win, Place, or Die. Do you recognize the author's name, Eric?
R.L. Stein. Wow. So we actually have some talent behind this, huh?
Nobody knew it at the time, but this is the guy who would go on to be well known for Goosebumps, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, it is that R.L. Stein. And what we're going to do here is a little bit of performance art. I have gotten a copy of this book for Eric, but I have instructed him to not read it, and he has not read it. Why have I not let him read it? For the simple reason of, I am going to read it to him, and he will be James Bond. And when we get to a choice, he will have to make it, not knowing what will happen. Will he live? Will he die? Will he find his fate?
Oh, wait, I'm not supposed to be the bad guy. I mean, oh no.
So, Eric, are you ready to find your fate as James Bond in Win, Place, or Die?
I absolutely am. Let's do this.
All right, let us begin the performance art. Brought to you by Brooks Brothers. No, just kidding. We start off in the Kamchatka Peninsula in northeastern Russia. You dig your ski poles into the ice. You move quickly, almost silently across the frigid wasteland, your skis gliding across the rock-hard frozen surface. Not exactly San Moritz or the slopes of Aspen, but you aren't skiing in this bone-chilling cold for pleasure. As James Bond, Secret Agent 007, you have a job to do. Agent 009 disappeared somewhere in this area. Your job is to find him. Beneath the gray sky, all is white, interrupted occasionally by a scraggly pine or jutting ledge of gray granite. Suddenly, you are startled by a far-off, high-pitched sound. What is that howling? We turn to page 12. You turn around. The mournful howls grow louder and then fade. Are there wolves somewhere nearby? All you can see is ice. Ice so hard your skis do not leave a trail. You ski on, looking for Agent 009. Agent 009 has contacted headquarters about an important discovery he'd made just before he disappeared. Perhaps the KGB captured him. Perhaps they left him out in this frozen wasteland to die. Will you find him in time to learn what he had discovered? Another sound behind you. This time it is definitely not wolves, unless the Russians have trained wolves to ride snowmobiles and shout and shoot. We turn to page 24. You have been spotted by the KGB. The goons are coming after you on snowmobiles. A rifle shot rings out, then another. Bullets whiz past your head. You duck your head down and try to ski faster, but they are gaining on you rapidly. You'll have to find a new way to escape. To the left, a low fog hangs over the flatlands. Perhaps you could escape into the fog. To the right is a tall, massive block of ice. There appears to be something inside the ice block. You must decide which way to ski. Left into the thick fog, or right toward the block of ice.
Ooh.
Eric, you must find your fate.
Oh my
gosh,
gosh,
turn
this
left
is a tough
or
one.
right?
This is a tough one. This is a left or right. I mean, geez, they start you off just real quick, huh? Thick fog, but there's something inside that ice block. Ooh, I want to find out what's in the ice block. Let's go right.
All right, we will turn right and therefore go to page 38. You ski toward the block of ice, the roar of the snowmobiles groaning louder as they pursue you. The ice block stands more than 8 feet tall. You jam your ski poles into the frozen snow and stop short. Your eyes grow wide in horror. The front of the ice block is clear as glass, and inside the ice stands Agent 009, victim of the KGB, his face forever frozen in agony. We turn to page 54. Is there a clue on Agent 009's body as to what he discovered before he was murdered? You have to find out. You press a button on the ski pole in your left hand, and a claw handle pops open. You switch on the power, and the claw jolts and buzzes. You work feverishly, scraping away the ice. Can you find what you're looking for before the KGB catch up to you? There are only seconds away. The motorized claw burns away the ice. You reach the agent's frozen body. You search frantically for any kind of clue. There are only 2 objects that might possibly tell you something. A ski lift ticket stapled to the string of his parka, and a silver locket dangling from a chain he's clutching in his frozen hand. You have time to take only one of these objects. Which will you take?
Oh my goodness, another tough choice. The ski lift ticket would tell me where he's been fairly recently, however, it might be a dead end. The locket, though, he's clutching it in his frozen hand. I mean, that means something. I say we go with the locket. We'll take the locket.
All right. Eric Dewey, 007, has chosen to take the locket. We turn to page 93. The KGB guards in the snowmobiles are only a few hundred yards away. You've got to get moving. You grab the locket and start to shove it in the pocket of your parka. But you cannot resist. You have to look inside. You push the tiny button on the side of the locket and boom! Curiosity killed the agent. The locket was booby-trapped and planted on 009. Nobody said this was going to be an easy mission. But you didn't have to go to pieces. Try to pull yourself together and start another adventure in this book.
Oh, that's sad. I just killed us. Wow, that was rough.
You killed us basically as quickly as we could possibly be killed.
That was pretty amazing. Okay, so explain to me why I'm like, I only have time to grab one of these things, even though both of them are sitting right in front of me. And yet I'm going to stop and take time to, I'm like, yeah, you know what? I got time to open this.
Apparently you're an idiot.
Evidently. Oh, do we want to go back and take the ticket instead and see where that leads?
Since you killed yourself so quickly, I think we can allow our listeners to have a little more adventure, don't you?
Right. This is how I would always read these books. If I hit the end that quick, I'd be like, I'm not going back to the beginning. I'm going back to the last decision I made. So
all
let's
right,
just
so,
say,
Eric, would you like to take the ticket or the locket?
Well, this is a tough call. Let's take the ticket and see what happens.
All right. Eric is going to take the ticket from 009's body, which leads us to page 87. You pull the lift ticket off 009's jacket. It is folded, and inside the fold is a tiny microchip. This must be what 009 discovered. Evidently, the KGB did find it. But now they will have you and the microchip if you don't get away fast. You activate the control module that powers the jet skis that Q designed for you.
Awesome.
Where would you be without Q and his amazing inventions? You would be in much better shape. The jet skis blast right off your feet. We turn to page 100. You are running on foot now, your boots digging hard into the frozen slick ice, slipping, stumbling forward. The snowmobiles are close behind. You reach into your backpack, grab an exploding flare, and toss it back over your shoulder. It explodes, blasting 2 snowmobiles into the air, spilling over a few more. That was your only exploding flare. Now what? Keep running? Or try to hijack the snowmobiles and make your escape? Eric, you must find your fate.
Oh, geez. To keep running or to stop and try to grab a snowmobile from its driver? Man. I think I want a snowmobile. I want to go on a snowmobile ride. So let's try to grab a snowmobile from its driver.
There's no point in running, you decide. On page 79. Even you can't escape on foot from a dozen snowmobiles. You turn to face them. The lead driver raises a rifle and fires. You duck one bullet, then another. A snowmobile is roaring right at you. You can see the grin on the red-faced driver as he gets ready to plow you down. You dodge to the right as the snowmobile zooms past, missing you by inches. You lunge forward, grab the back of the vehicle, and pull yourself up behind the driver. He accelerates, swerves, skids one way, then the other, trying desperately to throw you off. Using strength you didn't know you had, you hang on and grab the driver by the shoulders. He reaches for a pistol, but you slap it away. A blow to the back of his neck, and the driver slumps over the steering wheel, unconscious. You try to push him out of the way and grab the wheel, but the snowmobile turns over on the ice. You let out an uncharacteristically uncouth cry as it lands on top of you. Oh shit. No, that's not in the book. Turn to page 115. You ignore the pain and pull yourself out from under the fallen snowmobile. The other KGB guards are closing in. You look from side to side. You are surrounded. It looks like an impossible situation. Impossible for anyone but James Bond, that is. With a burst of strength, you'll pull the rudders off the bottom of the snowmobile. You step onto them and manage to fashion some skis and makeshift bindings.
Of course.
Then you reach into your backpack and remove 2 small rods about the size of chopsticks. You push and twist their tops and they unfold into regulation ski poles. Good old Q. He thinks of everything. You dig your poles into the ice and the chase is on. Your startled pursuers quickly get over their surprise and race after you with new determination. The ice begins to grow softer, occasionally interrupted by pools of water. The pools grow larger and more frequent. You are getting nearer to the Bering Sea. Skiing at full speed over these ice floes, you are faced with a decision. Which direction should you try? Left or right? Will the famous Bond luck carry you out of this frozen wasteland to safety? Pick a direction and find out.
Ooh, another tough left or right call. I went right last time, but I did find, technically I achieved my objective last time I went right because I found 009. So, yeah, there's that. Or I could go left, go for a change. Oh, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. You know what? Let's go right.
We're going to turn right to page 33. You turn sharply to your right and pull yourself over the ice floes. Your ski poles make a sucking sound as you pull them up from the soft slush. The snowmobiles have no trouble on this wet terrain. The KGB guards are only a few hundred yards behind you now. Straining every muscle, you ski onto a large ice floe with a mysterious gray patch in the center. You kick off your skis. You pound with both fists on the gray patch. The gray metal clangs under your hand. A hatch opens. There is a submarine under the ice floe. You drop down the hatch and it slams shut behind you. The engines start up. You have escaped with the all-important microchip. Hope I didn't keep you waiting, you say to a figure wearing a parka. The figure turns around. It is Kimberly Jones, a beautiful young agent. She gives you a warm, friendly smile. You know, I usually don't allow myself to be picked up in strange places, you tell her with the famous Bond grin. She grins back. This is going to be a very pleasant trip back to London. Enjoy it while you can, you age-appropriate listeners. The dangers have only just begun, as we will learn on page 16. So, Eric, do you need a drink after that? Or...
Need a cigarette, man. Wow. All right.
Now, we don't encourage smoking.
No.
On page 16. When you return to London, all refreshed... I added that part. You are immediately summoned to the office of M, your superior at Secret Service headquarters. Miss Moneypenny greets you at the reception desk. You're looking well, James. Cool weather. It does wonders for the skin, you reply. Cool weather. Is that what you call 40 below? She says with a laugh. M interrupts you before you can answer and ushers you into his office. He gives you his usual somber look and he offers you the chair in front of his large mahogany desk. How was your trip, 007? He asks, nervously shuffling papers. I received a somewhat chilly reception, you tell him. But after I came into possession of this small items, things got quite a bit hotter. You place the microchip on M's desk. M frowns. This is a new type of microchip, 007, he tells you, holding it up close to examine it. I don't know of anyone who really understands what's different about it. That's how new it is. Agent 009 stole it from the KGB. It's hard to believe that tiny chip cost him his life, you say grimly. My question is, M says thoughtfully, how did the Soviets get it in the first place? A good question, but learning the answer may cost you your life, as we find out turning to page 44. M puts the microchip into a small leather case and tucks the case into his desk drawer. The chip was manufactured in top secrecy by a company owned by this man. M tells you as he hands you a colored photograph. His name is Max Zorin. Is this the same Zorin who owns racehorses, you ask, studying the picture of the blonde man with the strange piercing eyes, one blue, one brown? Why, yes. How did you know that? Oh, I just get out to the track sometimes, you reply. Just for the beauty of the horses, of course. I seem to recall that Zorin owns a few second-rate horses, nothing one would ever bet on, if one were inclined to bet. Well, 007, lately these second-rate horses have been winning race after race. Unusual, isn't it? Very, you say. But we have gotten off the subject. What I must know is, how did Zorin's secret microchip get from his plant in France to the Soviets? Is Zorin working with the KGB? Did he sell this chip to them? And what does he plan to do with this chip? I surmise that my job is to find the answers to these questions? You ask slowly, as if you really had to ask. Right as usual, 007, M says with a nervous smile. Go on to page 45. You know, the next one.
Yeah.
Investigating Max Zorin and his mysterious world of racehorses and microchips will lead you into the most dangerous adventures you have experienced as Agent 007. First, you must decide where to begin the investigation. Do you choose to go to the racetrack outside London where Zorin's horse, Pegasus, is about to race? Perhaps there is something particular about why this second race horses always win. Or do you choose to go to France and begin the investigation at Zorin's headquarters, where the secret microchip was manufactured? Find your fate, Eric.
Ooh, another tough one. This one, more than just a left or right, huh? Go to the racetrack, see the ponies, or go to Max Zorin's headquarters and get my freak on with Christopher Walken. Let us start at the racetrack. Let's go see the ponies.
All right. Eric's going to be the pony boy on page 53. Before heading to the track, you stop in at Q's lab to see if he has invented anything that might be useful in your investigation.
Dang right.
This is most interesting, Q, you say, fingering a black metal box with a handle.
Fingering.
What does it do? That's my lunchbox, 007, Q replies. Then he hands you a riding crop. I'm not going to race, I'm just going to be a spectator, you say, examining the riding crop. Q ignores your remarks. Pull the handle here and it shoots out an exploding flare, he tells you. But be careful, don't drop it, it explodes on impact. Well, that's one way a jockey can win a race, you say, holding the riding crop more carefully. That's one way you can stay alive. Maybe, Q says grimly. Then he attaches a small button to your jacket. It's actually a small 35mm camera, he tells you. Smallest one I ever made.
Smaller than 35 millimeters?
Indeed. I'll try and take some good pictures with it, you tell him. See you later, Q. Right now I've got to see a man about a horse, as they say. Ba-dum-bum. You walk down the street, where a car waits to take you to the racetrack. And page 2. At the racetrack, you take a seat in the grandstand and raise the binoculars to your eyes. There's Max Zorin in his box, a tall blonde man, conservatively well-dressed, surrounded by a group of men in business suits. Next to him sits a remarkable-looking young woman. Her hair is cropped short in a crew cut, and she wears a tightly fitting leather dress that is about the same color as her dark brown skin. Around her neck, she wears heavily jeweled chains. She looks very out of place among all these gray-suited businessmen. You use the tiny button camera to take pictures of everyone in Zorin's box. You recognize the woman? Wait a minute. Yes, of course. She is Mayday, a flashy and deadly agent who is said to work for the KGB. You focus the binoculars on Zorin. His eyes are not on Mayday, who is talking and gesturing to him. His eyes are on the starting gate, where the horses are being lined up. Zorin holds a silver-tipped cane tightly in his hand. He leans forward expectantly as the gate opens and the horses gallop out on the track. You glance at the betting sheet in your lap. Zorin's horse, Pegasus, is a 30-1 long shot. But long shots do come in. We turn to page 10. And they're off. Pegasus trails the pack all the way into the home stretch. The screams of the crowd grow louder and louder as the horses approach the finish line. Suddenly, Pegasus puts on a burst of speed that causes the crowd to gasp. Zorin's horse speeds past the others and wins the race by a head. You look over to Zorin's box. He and Mayday have left it and are already heading to the winner's circle. Another victory for one of Zorin's inferior horses. You tear up your betting ticket in disgust. Then you look up to see a commotion near the winner's circle. Pegasus leaps up and away from his jockey, kicks over a trophy stand, whinnies wildly, tosses his head from side to side, and rears up in his hind legs. People run to get out of the way. Can anyone calm him down? We'll find out on page 27. Dun, dun, dun. Suddenly, Mayday leaps up and grabs the horse's reins. He's had too much, you hear her say. With her incredible strength, she pulls the horse down and holds his head between her hands. The horse struggles to pull back, but she is too powerful for him. Soon he gives up. She lets go and he stands there without moving, lowering his head. His eyes still wild, but the fight taken away from him. How did this second-rate horse win the race? And what did he have too much of? You can decide to go back to the stable to see if you can find any clues there. Should you pretend to be a horse breeder interested in buying one of Zorin's horses and approach Zorin directly? Or should you just hide inside the stable and see what you can learn? It's your choice. Eric, you must find your fate.
Ooh, pretend to be a breeder or just hide? You know what? Bond is not a hider. Well, except when he hides. And he's not a pretender, except when he pretends. So let's go ahead and pretend to be a breeder.
We can make lots of jokes about being a breeder there, can't we? So we go to page 37. You race after Zorin and Mayday and are being... After the race, Zorin and Mayday are being congratulated by well-wishers in the stable area. You hear Pegasus whinnying loudly in the stable, still not completely calmed. Despite his smile, Zorin seems nervous. How do you do? It's a pleasure to see you again, you tell him, giving him a hearty handshake. Zorin squints at you. It's obvious he doesn't remember you since you've never met, but he cannot let on. Ah, yes, Mr. Please, could we be on a first-name basis by now, you say, not letting go of his hand, making him more and more uncomfortable. Call me Edgemont. We are members of the Sable family, have always been informal, you know. Now, why haven't we seen you at Sable Stables? I've told you many times how eager I am to purchase some of your thoroughbreds. Zorin, puzzled, looks at Mayday, who stares at you. Charmed, you say, and offer her a hearty handshake. She turns away. Maybe you look too much like Roger Moore. Perhaps you would like to pay a visit to my chateau outside of Paris, Zorin suggests. I will be offering some horses for sale this weekend. Yes, perhaps you would. It could prove to be a very interesting trip, which you go to page 3 for.
All right.
Your room at Zorin's majestic, sprawling chateau overlooks the swimming pool and tennis courts. Behind a formal garden, you can see a riding path and the stables. Zorin has built quite a castle for himself, you think. Now, why does he need the KGB? And did you notice the neat trick of how he managed to get to the chateau? Did you notice that?
Poof, he's there.
So, we could have skipped that whole horse racing thing. But anyway, that night, you excuse yourself from dinner early on, carrying your riding crop and wearing the special button camera. Make your way to the back stables. You search around, examining the horses. You don't see anything unusual. You're not sure what it is you're looking for, but you know there's something mysterious about Zorin's horses. You've never seen a horse behave quite the way Pegasus did. You pat a horse on the head and it nuzzles the front of your jacket. Suddenly you back away. Footsteps! Someone has entered the stable. We go to page 39. You dive into an empty stall and hide behind the low wooden wall. You peer over it and see one of the stable hands come in to bed down the horses. You wait in silence for him to complete his work. There is something strange about him. He moves rather quickly, never looking around or hesitating. You notice a scar on his right temple. A few moments later, he is gone, and you can continue your search. What is that metal door at the back of the stable? You pull it open. An elevator! Or as he should say, a lift. You climb inside. The elevator takes you down into a chamber beneath the stables. You step out into a sort of surgical laboratory. You begin taking pictures with the button camera. A whinny. There is a horse down there. Judging from a large bandage on the horse's head, the animal has recently had surgery of some sort. You pry open a large medicine chest on the wall. You search inside and find the chest is filled with hundreds of microchips. You find bottles of chemicals. Reading the labels, you see these bottles contain steroids. This is all beginning to come together, you say. You turn to page 105 and wait for Alex Rodriguez to... No, sorry. In this dark, underground chamber beneath Zoran's stables, you begin to put together the pieces of the puzzle. Zoran must be implanting these special microchips in his horses, and he must be injecting them with steroids, which pump the adrenaline and hide all the muscle fatigue. During the race, Zoran must activate the chip, probably with some kind of remote control device. The chip releases the steroids inside the horse at just the right moment, and then the horse bursts forward to win the race. And what of the scars on the workers' temples? Is Zoran implanting microchips into people? Can he control people as well as horses by remote control? I believe I have some interesting tidbits for M, you tell yourself. You remove your standard issue micro radio phone from your jacket pocket. Should you contact M immediately with what you've discovered? Or would it be safer to get back to your room and radio phone M from there? It's your decision. Eric, you must find your fate.
Oh, geez. Oh, no. Another tough one. Do I want to contact him immediately, risk being caught in the surgical laboratory trying to contact, or do I try to make my way back to my room and risk getting caught somewhere along the way? Oh, it's a tough call. I am going to go back to the room first.
Eric, go to your room on page 59.
59 or is it 103? Oh, no, 59. Yep, you're right. 103 was the other one. My bad.
It is.
All right.
You take the elevator back up to the ground level and walk quietly out of the stable. You hear someone whistling, so you duck into shadows. It's only another stable hand. He walks right past you, a bucket of water in his hand. Your eyes catch the red scar on his right temple. How strange. Back at your room, you radio phone M. He's pleased, but he needs to know more. Next morning, Zoran invites you to go horseback riding. He climbs onto his horse, and a stable hand hands him up his silver-tipped cane. The cane! You realize you've never seen Zoran without the cane. Perhaps it contains the remote control device. Oh my gosh.
Ooh.
I've picked a special horse for you, Edgemont, he says. I think you'll enjoy the ride. His name is Inferno. You have a feeling of foreboding as you climb onto the tall back of this horse, which stamps the ground uneasily, shaking his long head from side to side. But you know you cannot refuse to ride.
I guess not.
Not on page 5. A few moments later, you are cantering down the soft path that goes along the highway. Suddenly, Zoran pulls up his horse and stops. He raises the silver-tipped cane and points it at Inferno. You feel a shiver goes through the horse's body, and then he rears up. Hold on for dear life, Bond. And turn to page 32. You hold on to the reins as the horse wriggles and kicks, tosses his head back, then stamps to the ground, leaning forward until you almost slide down his mane. Behind you, Zoran laughs loudly. I recognized you immediately, Bond, he yells gleefully, enjoying your desperate attempt to stay in the saddle. Nothing will give me greater pleasure than watching my horse trample one of England's finest secret agents. Ha ha! You decide you do not care for Zoran's sense of humor. You take the riding crop flare and toss it back. It explodes in front of his horse. The horse rears up, and now Zoran is holding on for dear life. You see a car coming down the highway. Perhaps you can flag it down and escape. Or should you try and stay on the horse and deal with Zoran? You have only seconds to decide. Eric, you must find your fate.
Only seconds to decide? Oh no. Well, I better not waste any time talking about how I only have seconds to decide then, huh? Yeah, let's see. Flag down the car or stay and try and defeat Zoran. You know what? We haven't gotten far enough story for me to try and defeat Zoran right now, so I sense something bad coming up if I do that. But flagging down the car and running away, I mean, that's really kind of lame. But that's what I'm going to do. Let's flag down the car.
Baby, you can drive my car on page 6. You leap off Inferno and hit the ground hard. You roll onto your knees and struggle to get up, stumble to the highway. You wave your arms frantically as the red sports car roars nearer. But the car doesn't slow down. In fact, the car speeds up.
Oh, crap.
Is the driver trying to run you down?
Oh, no.
We'll find out on page 18. The car is nearly on top of you now. You can see the driver. It's Mayday. And she's not going to stop because you look too much like Roger Moore. But as the car zooms past, you are able to grab hold of the sunroof on top. You pull yourself up onto the back of the car as Mayday spins and swerves, trying to knock you off. She obviously doesn't believe in picking up hitchhikers. You've had enough wild rides for one day. You drop down through the sunroof and take the seat beside her. Thanks for the lift, you say nonchalantly. And then we turn to page 111.
All right.
Mayday doesn't smile, but she doesn't try to shove you out of the car either. Something in her eyes shows defeat. She isn't going to fight you. I know who you are, she says, her sad eyes on the road. We've been on different sides up till now, but now maybe it's different. What do you mean? You ask. Which side is Zoran on? He's on his own side. He's loyal to no one but himself, she says with disgust. That's why I had to leave him. Mayday is about to give you the missing pieces to the Zoran puzzle.
Oh, yeah.
But only after you turn to page 67. Zoran is crazy, Mayday tells you, hatred blazing across her face. He betrayed the KGB and he betrayed me. Now I'm going to betray him. What's he up to, you ask? Surely the KGB isn't all that interested in racehorses. Racehorses have nothing to do with it, she replies, pushing her foot down harder on the accelerator, checking the rearview mirror to see if you're being followed. Putting the microchips in horses was just the first step. For months, Zoran is putting the chips into people. He fills these men with steroids. The chips release the steroids, and he activates the chip with his cane. His microchip men are 5 times as strong as normal men. They're Zoran's slaves. He's building a huge army of these monsters. Mayday stares ahead at the road. I'm getting as far away as I can from that madman. If you want, you can come with me. You look into Mayday's eyes. A lot of her bizarre story does make sense, considering she's just said everything you've talked about already. That part's not in the book. But can you trust her? Eric, you must find your fate.
Oh, so my choice is, do I think Mayday is on the level, or if I do not trust her? You know what? I'm going to give this crazy gal the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to say that she's on the level.
All right. We turn to page 99. You decide to believe Mayday's story. From the way she presses her foot harder on the accelerator, you can see she's eager to get away as far from Zoran as she can. What is Zoran really after? The love and respect of his workers, you ask? She laughs. Haha, very funny, Bond. But this isn't a laughing matter, she says after she just laughed. Zoran is after control of the world! Oh, that old thing, you say, still studying her eyes. There's going to be a very glamorous horse race in St. Ambrose, she tells you, ignoring your stare. Heads of state from all over Europe, and the Sheikh of Catan, the one with the billions of dollars in oil, they're all going to attend this race. And Zoran will be there with his microchipped horse, you ask? Yes, the horse will be there, but believe me, Bond, Zoran doesn't care anything about who wins the race. What does she mean?
What?
We find out on page 88. Mayday continues her story. Zoran is going to have his microchip men disguised as spectators and photographers all over the stands at the racetrack, ready to spring into action when he activates his cane. And the horse? Zoran will cause the horse to go wild and throw the jockey. That will create a diversion. Then he will signal his super soldiers to attack the VIP box and kidnap the Sheikh and other leaders. Zoran will demand billions in ransom for their return. Good plot, you say. But every good plot has a few twists along the way, and maybe even a surprise ending. What do you plan to do, she asks. Visit St. Ambrose, you say. I'm sure something will occur to me when I get there. Just drive me to the airport, ma chérie. Wow, he called her ma chérie? Really?
Yes, evidently.
All right, so we go to page 43.
All right.
It is a day of warm breezes and golden sunshine. St. Ambrose is pink and sparkling, a tiny jewel of a city where princes and kings come for vacation. The race is only minutes away. The track is filled with glamorous spectators who file into their private boxes, unaware that the beautiful day may be spoiled by a dark crime, unless you can find a way to stop it. Behind the stable area, you meet Kimberly Jones, a beautiful young secret agent, who seems just as confused as you about how to proceed. I checked the VIP box, she tells you, nervously tugging at her long blonde hair. The Sheikh is there. Every head of a European nation is there. And the security consists of about 10 men who seem more interested in the race than their jobs.
Oops.
I checked out Zoran's private box, you tell her. He's right next to the Sheik and the other leaders, but the security around Zoran is tighter than for the Sheik. No way we can get to him. We've got to think of something else. But what?
But what?
Find out on page 11. You watch as the trainer leads Zoran's horse, Pegasus, out of the stable toward the starting gate. The jockey seems to be delayed for some reason. You can see him getting dressed in the tack room. James, I bought robes for you. A caftan, just like the members of the Sheik's party are wearing, Kimberly says. Maybe you could infiltrate his box and protect him and the other leaders from there. Not a bad idea. You know, you should be a secret agent, you tell her. It gets a laugh and breaks the grim seriousness of your mood. Maybe I should go for a horseback ride instead, you suggest, holding the exploding riding crop tightly in your hand. If I take the jockey's place, I can stop Zoran's diversion from taking place and maybe stop this whole plot. Which plan do you choose to try? Eric, you must find your fate.
Ooh. Put on the white caftan and try to sneak into the Sheik's box, or try to take the jockey's place and foil Zoran's plans. Let's try to take the jockey's place and foil Zoran's plans.
All right, because obviously you are a 5-foot jockey.
Of course.
We go...
Wait a minute.
That page didn't work.
It says turn to page 67. We've read 67.
Yes, we have.
This book is broken.
Hang on.
I wonder if it's supposed to be 57. Does that make sense?
I think I may have found it.
70?
Okay, I think it is... All right, no, that's not it.
Nope.
The book is broken.
You know what? Why don't we just put on the white caftan and try to sneak into the Sheik's box? We can figure out how this book is broken later. We find out what was supposed to happen when we took the jockey's place.
That is so awesome. So, on page 72, trick or treat, you say, straightening your caftan. Don't say that. You look very authentic, Kimberly says seriously. Just don't try to look anyone in the eye and don't start a conversation with anybody. Thank you for the advice, you say sarcastically. You may not believe this, but I have been in disguise once or twice before. She blushes, which somehow adds to her allure. But no time for that sort of thing.
Nope,
you age-appropriate audience, you. You make your way back into the crowd and head for the back of the VIP box. You walk right past two of the Sheik's guards who don't pay any attention to you at all. Maybe this is going to be easier than you think. Maybe not. A tall white-robed guard blocks your path as you start to take a seat behind the Sheik. He asks you something in Arabic and stands waiting for a reply. On page 80, you shrug, looking away. The guard repeats his question, sounding more insistent. For a brief second, you think of shoving past him, but that will only get you caught and tossed out. Suddenly, trumpets play a fanfare. The race is about to begin. The white-robed guard turns away from you, his attention on the starting gate. You walk past him quickly and try and lose yourself among the other white-robed occupants of the box. You make your way over to the side next to Zoran's box. Everyone's attention is on the race that has just begun. All eyes following the pack of horses as they near the first turn. You are about 3 feet from Zoran now. He stands watching the race, emotionless, fingering the silver-tipped cane. You have only seconds in which to act. Do you try and snatch the cane, or do you make a grab for Zoran? Eric, you must find your fate.
Ooh, another tough call. Go for the cane, or go for Zoran himself. You know what? If he's got the cane, he controls all the slave men and the horses and whatnot, so I'm going to try to get that cane.
All right. Eric tries raising cane. On page 98.
You got good chicken fingers.
Chicken fingers.
Mm-hmm.
You lean forward, closer, closer, as you move your hand towards Zoran. You age-appropriate audience.
Oh, just trying to touch his cane.
Your plan is to make a trade. Your exploding riding crop for his cane. If you can make the switch without his noticing, his plot will be stopped before it begins. You reach forward to make the trade. The cheers of the crowd grow louder as the horses make for the far turn and head into the home stretch. Zoran is obviously waiting for the climax of the race to create his diversion and put his army into action. You take a deep breath as you reach for the cane, you age-appropriate audience. And Zoran moves it over into his other hand.
Ooh, a little bit of the stranger.
Which means we're
right.
turning to page 34.
All right, then.
Then Zoran moves the cane back into the hand nearest to you. Wow, that was lucky.
He moves the cane into the other hand, and then he moves it back.
You reach over quickly and make the trade, slipping the riding crop into his hand and removing the silver-tipped cane. Zoran still has his eyes on the track. There's a fairly triumphant look on his face. He must be about to activate the steroids of Pegasus. You lean over the side of the box and drop the cane down to Kimberly. She gives you the A-OK sign and disappears with it under the stands. So far, so good. You watch as Zoran gets ready to put his plot into action. He lifts his hand in the air and then realizes he's holding a riding crop instead of his cane. He screams, and in a fury of rage and disgust, tosses the riding crop to the floor of the box. Baroom!
It's a fantastic explosion noise.
Thank you.
Boom.
I majored in explosion noises.
All right.
No, just kidding. We turn to page 8. You back away as the smoke clears. The explosion of the riding crop arouses the Sheik's bodyguards to action. Wait! Zoran cries as they advanced against him. He has attacked our leader! One of the bodyguards screams in English, because that's what the readers read. In seconds, swords are drawn, because they're Arabic.
Yeah.
Zoran attempts to flee, but his way is blocked by spectators panicked by the explosion. A deafening cheer goes up as the winning horse crosses the finish line. The cheer drowns out the screams of Zoran as the swords of the Sheik's bodyguards finish him off. Wow. Rough. He slumps to the floor of the box, as dead as the plot he had hoped to bring off.
Oh, we killed Zoran. All right.
We turn to page 116. Bring another bottle of wine, please, Kimberly, you say, lying back in the deck chair and basking in the warm Mediterranean sun. But James, it's all the way on the other side of the yacht. I don't think I could walk that far, she says dreamily from the chair beside you, you age-appropriate audience. Do you think you could manage to wave to the steward to bring it, you ask? I'll try, she says, laughing. This is the life, isn't it? The Sheikh is a very generous man, you say. A vacation on the Mediterranean on his private yacht, just because I saved his life.
Oh, that little thing.
We have enough food and wine to stay out here for at least a month, Kimberly says. How chic, you reply. You both laugh at the bad pun as the Sheikh's long white yacht glides safely through the purple waters toward the sun-golden horizon. You age-appropriate audience. The end.
So we found one of the successful endings. Yay! Although I think
only after 2 false starts.
Yes, and I do think that I think I may have found the. Do you think it was page 9 was the correct where it said to go to 67 and 67 had already been read? If you look at page 9, it seems to be appropriate for that choice, I think.
It seems to be.
Yeah, so I would have died there. So I'm glad the book broke.
So Eric would have died twice.
Yep. But hey, the second time
you died
I made it
almost
through.
as quickly as you possibly could, I think. I mean, I honestly have not read these books since I was a kid. I mean, I read these when they came out, okay? So...
Yeah, I guess the only question would be if you could die from turning left, because I died on the second choice. So the only question is, could you die on the first choice? Was that even an option? Let's see.
Yeah, I remember. Right. I think the locket was the quickest way you can die. This is why I tend to reread things very infrequently, because I actually remember most of this book. Not enough that I would have been able to make all the right choices. Actually, I would have picked the ticket because I vaguely remembered the locket being bad, but I didn't remember why. So I do remember a long time. That's why. But overall, again, age-appropriate jokes aside, I think that the books are actually pretty good. What about you? What do you think?
I thought it was pretty decent. I mean, especially, considering you have to look at it through the eyes of a younger mind reading it. Like you said, with the age appropriateness, I probably wouldn't recommend it for little kids. The grade school age that it was originally aimed at is probably too young. But it's a fun book for like middle schoolers or something to that effect, I would say.
Yeah, and aside from the one break in the story that we found, it was actually a pretty engaging adventure. I enjoyed reading it even as an adult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fun. I've always liked those choose-your-own-adventure type stories and books. I read a lot of them when I was younger. So,
in fact, I felt more engaged reading this than I did playing Bloodstone.
I can definitely agree with that. Definitely. And, only one moment of clunkiness there as opposed to the entirety of the controls being clunky.
Yeah. So, and these books, of course, are long out of print. The success in finding them is going to vary wildly. It may take you several shops on the internet in order to do it. Because depending on who has it available when, because, of course, you're only going to be able to get these used. I have not found any electronic editions of these. I've seen them from just $1 to $40.
Holy jeez.
So there's a reason we don't have all 4 of them yet.
Yeah, just taking a look at the back of the book here, it tells us that we have Win, Place, or Die, which is the one we read. And then there's also Strike It Deadly, Programmed for Danger, and Barracuda Run, which I'm hoping there may be sharks in that one.
Sharks. Unfortunately, that is not the other one I've already managed to procure for us.
Uh-oh.
So yes, we will be doing this again, ladies and gentlemen. I know I had fun doing it. I hope you did listening to it. Did you have fun doing it, Eric?
I sure did. Absolutely.
Even though you killed us as quickly as you possibly could.
Hey, that's how I roll. We'll flip it around next time, maybe. I'll read and you can choose, and we'll see how quickly you kill us.
All right, I think that's fair.
Of course, no, you'll probably just go straight through the entire best storyline possible the first time, and I'll be like, son of a...
And so, you meet Paula Ivanova in a bar again. And then the next day, you do it again. And then you beat the bad guy, and you celebrate with Paula Ivanova again.
Once again. Yeah, I thought it was interesting how they... because some of your choices may have led to skipping over your first foray with the beautiful young agent. They had to describe her as the beautiful young agent again when you ran into her again, because who knows, maybe you didn't take that choice where you already got to spend a week with her in the submarine. But hey, that's cool.
Yeah, so, and by the way, our official count, I think, for the successful version of storyline was at least 2, and you get a week with her the first time and a month the second. So basically, whatever your stamina can handle.
A whole lot of shaking going on. Absolutely. It was definitely a fun little story, and obviously very closely tied into the storyline from A View to a Kill, minus the actual major plot of A View to a Kill, but...
Well, each one of the books went to a different part of where the movie went. Like another one takes place more in San Francisco, that sort of thing. They each take a different section of the story and run with it.
Okay, so they're all based. I just noticed that it does say based on the sensational new 007 film, A View to a Kill. So they all go along some part of that storyline. Cool, it's interesting.
Indeed.
So if you read all 4 of them, successfully, do you get the entire story of View to a Kill?
And you've managed to defeat Zorn like 4 times.
I killed this guy 4 times. I don't even know how he keeps coming back.
Yeah, shish kebab with all those swords. That's rough, man.
I swear I've killed this guy like 4 times, and he still showed up in the James Bond Jr. cartoon. I don't even know how that happens.
Dun, 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 dun. And he turned green.
See, that would at least make sense, because he'd be like, okay, zombie Zoran. Okay, zombie Zoran would make sense.
With big Flava Flav chains.
And at some point, ZZ Top guest stars, because, ZZ, so they had to add Sharp Dressed Man comes playing on or something. I don't know.
Wow.
That was a stretch. Okay, I'll admit that one.
Yeah, but it was a good stretch. I don't mind that. I like ZZ Top, so,
I saw them live.
And by the way, in places that speak Queen's English, it still is ZZ Top. It's not ZZ Top, at least anywhere that I've heard. I mean, so just saying.
Well, it's because it's their name, so they get to determine how it's pronounced, I suppose.
Well, yeah, but Germans call their country Deutschland, and most of us don't seem to care.
Well, it's because the Germans lost the right to tell us anything. No, I'm just kidding. We'll call you what we want to call you. No, but yes, the basic point of this episode was to prove that there is James Bond stuff out there for the younger audience, not just for the adults among us. And some of that stuff is even fun for the adults to go back to. Not so much the cartoon series, but the game was somewhat entertaining, although not exceptionally well done. But there have been other 007 video games that have been very, very well done. Obviously, GoldenEye on Nintendo 64 is a prime example. Just an amazingly fun game, both in story mode and, of course, the multiplayer mode when you got to shoot all your friends. But,
and by the way, Bloodstone does have a multiplayer mode. I doubt you'll find anyone else except possibly a close personal friend at this point, so I didn't go into that at all.
Yeah. At some point, maybe we can, if I get a system that will run it properly and can play, maybe we can jump on and play at the same time. Who knows? We can give it a shot, report back later at some point.
Indeed, and I'm sure we'll be revisiting the Find Your Fate series eventually. And
absolutely.
If I ever feel like a masochistic streak again, dun 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 dun. Which Bond do you think that James Bond Jr. would have grown up to be, by the way? I have a very clear image in my mind, but I'm curious what you think.
Oh, it's tough. Just based on those 7 episodes, I'd have to lean... I would probably lean towards Roger Moore.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know.
What makes you say that?
I don't know. Maybe it's just the 80s-ness of it, even though it was in the 90s. 80s-ness I just kind of associate with him. I mean, you could go Dalton too, I suppose, but I think Dalton was more actual 90s. So I guess it would make sense that he would grow into that. But yeah, I kind of got a Roger Moore feel from it.
Okay. I'm kind of surprised because I thought it was really, really clear for me. And I just thought, I was just curious if your thought process went the same way. I saw Pierce Brosnan all the way.
Really?
Because the kid strikes me as Remington Steele almost entirely. That's who I pictured the entire time. Is him growing up as a Remington Steele.
I could see that, I suppose. I just didn't, I don't know, maybe it was the jacket, but something just, it didn't, that's not what popped up for me. If I went back and watched it again, which I won't do for some time, but if I did, I maybe look at it from a different perspective and see that more.
Well, I'm sure we'll find out at whatever point we decide to cover Episode 8. Episode 9. But for right now, that's going to do it for the fun for the whole family episode of Her Majesty's Secret Podcast.
Don't forget to check us out online at hermajestiespod.com. We're also on Facebook. You go to facebook.com/hermajestiespod. Give us a like over there. We just recently hit 100 likes on that page, so come join 100 other cool people who like us if you haven't already. And
we know that there are lots more of you out there because we see how many people listen to the show, and it's way more than 100.
Exactly.
And we really, really, really appreciate that. So thank you for listening to the show, and we hope you keep listening.
Absolutely. So I guess until next time.
I'm Ziggy Berkeley.
And I'm Eric Dewey.
And you have been listening to Her Majesty's Secret Podcast, only on The Fern.
Hi, this is Jeff from the 12A Podcast. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this show, please make sure to check out more on 4eyeradio.com.